Alright, so what makes a Serious Sam game? Primarily, these are first-person shooters featuring our hero Sam Serious Stone, who fights hordes of monsters in large, yet linear environments. The foes you face all have distinct personalities defined by their methods of which to attack you. Your weapons also have personalities, though, defined by how the player assigns them to each situation. There's a natural flow to Serious Sam's gameplay that makes it consistently engaging, so long as you've properly adjusted. The original game was going to be split into 3 parts, the first, second, and third encounters. However, the third encounter was scrapped. Instead, the developers at Croteam went for a full-blown sequel approach. So how would they follow up the classic games? By making it even crazier than before! That said, this level of craziness lost some of the feel that made the series what it was. There were so many new and diverse enemies that this flow of gameplay became less formulaic. Instead, the player might find themselves shooting anything that moves with whatever weapon they had the most ammo for at the time. Of course, there's also the overly goofy tone, which is what most people criticized it for. Some people love the mindless shooting of Serious Sam 2, and you can't blame them for it, but it was definitely lacking something that the originals had. Croteam, the guys behind Serious Sam, went on record to admit that this game was a bit of a misstep for them. So they would next try to win back old fans by remastering the first 2 encounters that made Serious Sam such a success back in the early 2000s. Afterwards came Serious Sam 3 BFE, a game that took a 180 compared to their last. Taking place in modern military environments, many felt it was just riding a trend for first-person shooters of its time. It's hard to say why exactly, but Serious Sam 3 ended up as the series' best-selling game. I theorize that this is partially the result of Steam dominating the PC marketplace with constant discounts and consumers trying to buff up their gaming catalog. Regardless, the sales undoubtedly opened the eyes of Croteam, who would now have to consider that a lot more people jumping in to play Serious Sam 4 would have probably played Serious Sam 3, and maybe not the other ones before it. In what was already a divisive series of games, it would make sense to finally stick with a set of principles. So did Sam 3 make any profound changes to this formula? Kinda. Reloading, sprinting, iron sights, the design of the weapons, everything was modernized. There exists some documentation on how Sam 3 turned out to be the way it was, like how they were aiming to assist with an upcoming Doom project at id Software, which fell through the cracks. They were left with their own tech demo, which included some enemies that were very reminiscent of Doom. These enemies would, like with a lot of other details from Sam 3, make their transition into Serious Sam 4 as well. The irony in this is how Sam 4 is actually a prequel to Sam 3, which pushes these seemingly time-sensitive characters further into the series' catalog. The chronological order for this series is something that confuses many people, but allow me to simplify it to the best of my ability. Currently, Serious Sam VR The Last Hope is the earliest game in the franchise. It, however, is just a battle simulation taking place on a spaceship called the Surveyor, something Sam used to be the captain for. As the title implies, this is a VR game. I do not own a VR headset, so I've only played as far as the game lets you go without one. This is not supported by the game, it's only made possible through console commands. Maybe some other day I can take a look at it, but for now, we'll set it to one side. Serious Sam 4 takes place at some point after The Last Hope. However, in this 4th game, it implies that many prequel stories exist, potentially 8. Serious Sam 3 would end up being a direct sequel to Serious Sam 4's events. Serious Sam The First Encounter takes place immediately after Serious Sam 3, and you can imagine where the second encounter fits into this picture. This timeline is accurate as of now, but who's to say whether Croteam will decide to throw us a curveball in the future and muck it all up again? Again? What was the first time? Well, what I just pointed out here is the seemingly canonical timeline. One of the earlier mentioned games, Serious Sam 2, was the canonical continuation after the second encounter. Initially. Change of plans, and now it's no more than a spin-off. So could Croteam write off Serious Sam 4 as a spin-off at some point? I mean, it seems less likely now given they have 2 standalone games fitting in this timeline, but then again, there is the alternate universe theory. A scene later into the game, without directly saying it, implies many different timelines exist for our protagonist, so that being said, there's really no reason for the other games not to fit into a canonical timeline of their own. It's all a bit hard to follow, but thankfully, the story doesn't matter in Serious Sam. Or does it? In late 2014, Croteam released a philosophical puzzle game called The Talus Principle. It was praised by critics, which inspired Croteam to start working on a sequel, which is in the works now. Funny story about the Talus Principle is how this game actually started as the Serious Sam 4 project. An unusual focus on puzzles eventually convinced them that these ideas would be better suited for another game entirely, and that's how the Talus Principle came to be. For this game, they managed to hire 2 writers, Tom Joubert and Jonas Karatzis. I haven't played the Talus Principle myself as, for whatever reason, Portal appeals to me, but this game never really did. Regardless, it was something new for Croteam. They would decide to continue this direction by employing Jonas Karatzes and his wife Verena Karatzes for writing the story of Serious Sam 4. The game starts off by introducing us to the main cast. We've got Quinn, the voice of HQ, to direct mission objectives in your intercom. Jones, a soldier for the EDF known for keeping it cool and collected. Rodriguez, a sinful EDF soldier known for being loud and mischievous. Kenny, a new recruit learning to fight among the best. He studied frogs before he joined the forces. Remember that now because it'll be important for one joke later. Carter. Nobody's sure what Carter does, it's classified. However, his role in the game is to serve as a conspiracy theorist who rambles on about nonsense for comedic effect. While it's meant for the audience to chuckle at, the character is not self-aware and completely believes what he says. Hellfire. A quirky EDF soldier who is also a vehicle enthusiast and may or may not be involved romantically with our protagonist, Sam Stone. The main man, the EDF soldier known for helping to save the world countless times against impossible odds, as well as being captain of the Starship Surveyor in years prior. Of course, there are other characters like Bill Corwin who hosts Radio Free Earth, as you will often hear when you pass by sitting radios. There's a lot of those in the game. Each time you pass one by, you'll hear a new segment from his broadcasts, which often discuss recent events in the game's world. They'll only activate if there are no enemies nearby. You never actually meet the guy. While his broadcasts all seem to originate from the radio, the player will also find small portable cassette recorders they can listen to, which contain older recordings of the show. These don't usually hold much significance to their legacy status, other than the occasional phone-in from noteworthy characters who were otherwise too occupied during the events of the game to submit for the broadcast. 3 other noteworthy characters are General Brand, Father Mikhail, and Lord Ackerman. Brand is the so-called general. He works with Quinn to give instructions and orders to the EDF. You don't see him all that much in the game. Usually when you do, though, he's flexing his tough guy image. Father Mikhail is a priest who will help the crew locate the Holy Grail, an ancient artifact that possesses divine powers which could greatly assist the EDF in fighting Mental. Oh, by association, I'll have to mention the god Taum. He's known as the Great and Notorious Mental. Why is he called Mental? Humanity gave him this nickname due to his chaotic intentions. Mental is responsible for all the chaos that takes place in this franchise. He's rallied up countless species from other planets in his conquest of universal domination. The monsters you fight in the game are the otherworldly creatures who united forces with Mental, or they're Mental's own creations from his biolabs. Any other species not fitting those two categories are implied to have been enslaved by the Galactic Warlord. Our planet, Earth, is just another one of those places Mental seeks to take over. Lastly, there's Lord Ackerman, a spokesperson for Mental who makes it his goal to persuade people of Earth to join their ranks with the use of countless propaganda initiatives. He also frequently attempts to demote traditional human values that we put so much faith into. What his ultimate motive isn't certain, but it's to be assumed that his position of power serves him well. One of the grand initiatives is to convince people to surrender themselves to harvester drones. These terrifying robotic inventions come out of the giant Octanian harvester leviathans that tower over some of the chapter's landscapes. Once a harvester drone locates a person, it captures them and begins the initiation of turning a typical, ordinary human being into a mindless slave for Mental's army. We'll save further elaboration for later. Chapter 0: Man vs. Beast. After the character introductions, the game places us in the middle of a massive fight with 100,000 allies and enemies on screen at once. What the heck's all this about? I think now makes for a good time to talk about what Croteam calls the Legion system, something that was referred to a lot in the game's minimalistic marketing. Being such an anticipated idea, people were a bit disappointed when it turned out to be underutilized. This invention of theirs is used just twice in the game, and both times in the exact same scenario. So as stated, the first level places you smack dab in the middle of it all. You shoot some rounds off, and then a character of unknown origin approaches and grabs you. Just after, you're greeted with a loading screen, followed by a subtitle that says Rome, Italy, 92 hours earlier. The battle you fought in momentarily is a glimpse into the final 15th chapter of the game, the only level where you actually encounter the Legion system. The Legion system doesn't actually render 100,000 active models at once. What the game actually does is turn all distant models into sprites, which due to the surprising amount of different angles, gives it the illusion of appearing 3D. This, along with mostly fake projectiles to damage the player, further sells the illusion. The issue I see with this is that the Legion system was criminally underused and over-specialized, being utilized only once in the game and for little more than visual grandeur. You are not actually fighting a legion of enemies. Initially, I anticipated there being more to say about the Legion system, but what else is there really to remark upon? If anything, I do think it's worth pointing out how the marketing would, on occasion, show these battles taking place in other locations, although I am told this is not an entirely uncommon practice in video game marketing. Chapter 1, Death from Above. So, 92 hours earlier, here we are in Rome. The new recruit named Kenny is asking questions related to the mission, which is used to inform the player of the ongoing situation. The Earth Defense Force is en route to collect the Ark of the Covenant, which contains the Holy Grail, an artifact which is also stated to be an alien artifact. Just after this, there's some back and forth about Sam's favorite author who happens to share the same last name as the voice actor.
Who's your favorite writer?
Philip K. Dick, I guess.
I think this is a joke, I'm not really sure. The convoy is then attacked by incoming raiders. These enemies serve only a visual purpose to the player. At one point they were planned to be fought like fighter jets from Serious Sam 2, but in the final game, no such thing. Instead, they're used for set pieces by launching missiles into buildings which then partially collapse. An excellent bit of detail that is unfortunately forgotten rather quickly into the game. These raiders are piloted by a species known as Octanians. We'll get to those shortly. The attack separates the crew into groups. Following Sam, the game starts with him and Kenny as your first ally. You have a Desert Eagle. You can perform iron sights, but it's completely useless as the crosshair is far easier to interpret. Seconds into the game, you come across two variants of the Syrian Beheaded. The Beheaded are post-soldiers from Sirius, a planet once home to countless humanoid creatures much like ourselves, but a bit taller and probably not as smart. They were killed off long ago, but brought back to life in order to serve as cannon fodder for the wars on different planets. The purple one is a Rocketeer. It shoots singular magic missiles at you. The red one is a Firecracker. He carries his own head. Isn't that fun? It shoots 5 missiles towards the ground that disperse. The green one is the Bomber. In the classic games, this guy had a full shirt of green, but in Serious Sam 4, there's patches of yellow on his outfit. Pre-release footage shows at one point his shirt was completely yellow. My theory is that the full green shirt made it difficult to make them out among the game's various grassy landscapes. Anyways, these guys throw bombs at the player in an arc. Once it's killed, it will explode shortly thereafter due to the unstable nature of their armaments. You can melee these guys as well without needing any SAM artifacts first. That's something we'll explain later, but in short, larger enemies cannot be meleeed without a skill point. The melee animation for these guys are unashamedly reused from Serious Sam 3. The fourth and final Beheaded is the Kamikaze, which is far more dangerous than the rest. It carries 2 fragmentation bombs which explode within range of a suitable target, or if shot and killed. Speaking of, if one gets too close to you, just shoot it once and it'll be stunned for a second. Back away, then go in for the kill. The Kamikaze's shirtless appearance brings more attention to the whole headless part. Right where a head should be is the Life Control Unit, an electronic device that regulates all bodily functions and has a voice synthesizer, which is used to create the audio you'll hear as they charge towards you. Honestly, these guys aren't too much of a problem because you can just run away, lol. Anyways, back to the mission. Here's a secret rocket launcher. There aren't many of these secrets in the game. Apparently, one of the game's respected testers said it wrecks balancing, so they limited this kind of stuff. Well guys, I guess all your favorite old school FPS games are unbalanced and therefore not as good. This is a sad day. And this is a processed anthropolyp. I glanced over this enemy type earlier. They're humans that were abducted by harvester drones. If Mental takes over Earth, you can expect these guys to fight for him in other future conquests. The process pretty much removes the human brain and replaces it with polyps that control the body. Let me tell you, Serious Sam 4 is pretty much obsessed with polyps, and I'm not quite sure why.
Don't you ever crave something fresh and new? How about tentacles?
I guess they're good for mind control, but it's not really specified. The process have claws and,
I'm like Wolverine, just like Wolverine.
Just shoot them in the head, lol. Or melee them, which has Sam pull out his knife to strike them in the head. Alternatively, you could just use your regular knife and swipe once, instead of sitting through an animation. Yep. Okay, it does still kind of have a use, but that's not until later. Then you get your single shotgun, which has an inspection animation as you pick it up. Awesome. Shoot those suckers. Interestingly, this shotgun once required reloading, unlike the finished game. This was obvious earlier on in an E3 video where the model was completely different, but this actually carried over into a later model that would eventually become the final model. So I think this idea went further into development than we initially thought. The single shotgun can't jib the Beheaded on a close-up kill anymore, something you could do in all previously released games, so that's a bit disappointing. Anyways, here's a female Gunnar. Like the Beheaded, they came from planet Sirius. They only have melee attacks, but they're damn fast, so keep your distance. When they pile up in numbers, it can be a deadly situation. These ladies are considered medium enemies, so you can't melee them just yet. Kinda weird because Sam makes a direct remark about how you can take them out with your hands.
Now, you can also take out a Gunnar with your bare hands, but for larger groups, go for a shotgun or assault rifle.
I mean, that's just not true, otherwise why would I need a skill point to do it? Use a double-barreled shotgun against them for maximum gory satisfaction. Too bad you don't have one yet, but that'll change soon. Oh look, it's an emetic anthropolyp, nicknamed Belchers. Kinda looks like a Methug soldier from Serious Sam Advance. I think these are one of Mental's own creations from his biolabs, but it doesn't really specify. Nonetheless, they're giant gassy creatures encased in metal chains for, I guess, no reason in particular. Shoot it a couple times and it will momentarily blow up, harming anything else within its blast radius. They also barf, so be clear of their barf radius, because that stings. The explosion it creates upon death has a graphical effect that almost always doesn't render properly, causing it to outline in the player's vision. I think this is a bug, considering it works correctly sometimes? So, Kenny has been following you around this whole time, right? He doesn't have a gun because his broke, so he's just kinda there. Anyways, there's a side objective just over this wall. So Kenny spreads out his arms in order to help you over, despite the fact that you can easily just hop up the thing. If I were to guess, this was something they had better planned for the game, but didn't end up developing this idea further. Threw it in there so it doesn't go to waste, I guess. Purely speculation, though. The side objective has you fight some monsters, including a male Gunnar, which is smaller than the females. You can melee these guys without a skill point. At the end of the side objective, there's a couple goodies. Before you dive in, though, you'll hear this nearby radio turn on, which broadcasts from the aforementioned Radio Free Earth.
Hello, folks. This is Bill Corwin on Radio Free Earth with the news.
You wouldn't expect this. The voice actor for Bill Corwin actually passed away in January 2021. Rest in peace. The actual recording here isn't important. Honestly, a lot of these broadcasts are either intended to be motivational or serve as a glimpse into the player's future. It references the plans of the EDF and efforts being made around the world. Many of these efforts you'll be involved in later on. Sure, it builds atmosphere, but you would expect something like this to have a larger purpose than simply that. The radios can be ignored entirely, and in doing so, I don't think you'd miss any important context. So back to the side objective, here you collect holo decoys. Before you deploy it, like all gadgets, you'll see this visual arc form on screen that determines how high or far you can throw it. You can deploy one at any time, which will project the user, which enemies will chase around while you take them out. It'll only be active for a short time. I usually forget about the gadgets as a whole in this game. I don't have the greatest attention span, and much like whatever sits at the back of my fridge, it's useless by the time I've remembered it. I'll still make an effort to document them, though. After this section, I noticed this entirely pointless corridor. You'd think there'd be at least something here, maybe even a shard of armor, but no, it's completely pointless. There's a few areas like this in the game, I'm not sure what that's about. It's double-barreled shotgun time! Now you can decimate those Gunnars.
Why won't that gate open?
Because it is an advanced automatic security gate, of course.
Yeah, that's the professor. His role is just to provide motive and incentive throughout the game. Can't really be more elaborate, there isn't really much to say about him. Then some werebills show up, oh man, with a cool character introduction too. These are hybrid cattles with Syrian DNA. Their attacks resemble what you would expect from a terrestrial bull. However, their endurance far exceeds them, so be attentive to avoid those dangerous horns. Sidestepping is your best bet. Shoot them directly in the face at close range with a double-barreled shotgun for an instant kill. I gotta say, these body-specific weak points were a really great idea. It brings a fresh new aspect to the slaughter in this franchise.
Oh, a harvester drone. Is that how they turn us into the processed?
Yep. Mothership sucks you up, spits out a tentacle brain killing machine. I guess Mental's really into recycling.
Hi, folks. This is Bill Corwin, and today I want to talk to you about Earth.
So here's one of those portable cassettes. Instead of sitting by the radio, now you can sit on the Natrixa message board. This message board, by the way, is what I've been showing you when it comes to enemies, weapons, and the likes. It stands for Neurotronically Implanted Combat Situation Analyzer, in short. It's how Sam is able to see the HUD and other such information, including this board of data at any point in time. Anyways, we're getting off topic. I don't think it was entirely necessary to split this radio idea into two different functions, which both require you to just sit and listen. Remember how Doom 3 would let you listen to recordings while you played the game? That was a nice quality of life adjustment. Whatever, I guess. It's equally pointless to listen to this time. I'm not trying to attack anyone who finds this interesting, nor the story writers, but I just don't see why this should interest us.
I'll try to make that a daily thing from now on. Thoughts on why we need to turn this around. Memories of why life is great.
Do people actually feel a sense of patriotism when playing a video game? Like, am I the weird one here? I feel like the game wants me to pump one fist in the air triumphantly with a cheeseburger in my other. Press forward a bit and we encounter those pesky Octanians. These are the guys that drive those raider ships that crashed into our convoy. They came from the Sigma Octantis system. These guys are like beefier beheaded enemies. Not much stronger, but utilize weaponry that is actually threatening. There are Gamma Troopers, which shoot lasers, Commanders, which deploy heat-seeking mini-rockets behind a shield, and Snipers, which take a second to fire, giving you a moment to seek cover or dispose of them quickly. Unfortunately, they're kind of boring. Yeah, I'm not really a big fan of the humanoid legions in Serious Sam games. Beheaded are the only exceptions for me. They're weird enough to be unique. I find it hard to believe that so many otherworldly creatures follow the humanoid design. It just seems a bit lazy to me. I mean, after all, Serious Sam 4 constantly uses mocap technology for its animations, so these would be far easier to manage. Credit where it's due, since there's an otherwise huge roster, but it's just, there's too many of these frequenting humanoid foes. It's just an opinion.
Humans of Earth, it's a wonderful day! The perfect day to surrender yourself for processing!
So here's one of them propaganda drones. Sometimes it'll play condescending messages intended to persuade the lesser intelligent humans into submission. Other times you get a holographic message from Lord Ackerman himself, doing the same thing but far more philosophically.
Once you understand that you are merely an atomized particle, a minuscule fleck of self-awareness drifting through an alien cosmos, you will understand that nothing truly exists except you.
I found these far more interesting to listen to than Bill Corwin, but even then, it's all just a bunch of jibber-jabber, really. I'd still rather walk on ahead to kill some biomechs, but hey, I appreciate the gesture. Speaking of which, these are minor biomechanoids. Biological mechanisms grown in Mental's biotanks. These guys shoot a bunch of lasers towards the player. They can also step on you if they get too close. They make noises as they walk, which makes it easy to anticipate their approach. One well-placed rocket is a great choice to take them down, so long as you have some on hand. Their entire face is just one big polyp with some teeth. Not a big fan of this design personally, but I do love the sounds they make. One of my friends theorizes they look this way because Mental was still figuring out how to design them, which is why they look more biologically finished in the order of the following games. Shortly after killing those guys, you get to see this scrapjack yeet a processed. I feel like these character introductions are really cool, and there should have been more of them. However, I do have a theory as to why there isn't. Every single one of them were used in trailers for the game, so, yeah. Scrapjacks are another creation of Mental's. They're disposable mega-soldiers made up of pieces from other dead, dismembered soldiers. I'm not sure what soldiers these guys are made up of. Soldiers aren't usually huge. Can't really understand why you fight one this early into the game because you don't have the weaponry for it. Your best bet is to aim for the head with your Desert Eagle from a great distance away. This takes a while. And this while includes dodging a barrage of rockets from its rocket launcher arms. Not the smartest idea here. Finish off this wave of enemies and you're on to Chapter 2. You know what'd be nice? An option to save and quit? I'm kind of amazed how Croteam still makes you sit through these painfully long loading screens before you get the option to leave. Chapter 2. Death from Below. So the father reveals that he came all the way from Russia to find the Holy Grail. He and many others believe it is the key to saving Earth. Sam's just there to escort. The effect of Sam running through the water looks pretty nice. It makes you wonder what happens if you were to shoot it. Nothing happens when you shoot it. Whatever, nitpicking, let's carry on.
An update on the Tunguska offensive.
I'd say something about this broadcast, but it serves the same purpose as the radios from the last chapter. Informative, but in no way helpful.
Is that a giant metal space snake?
Nah, it's just foreshadowing. And so is this. So a bunch of processed show up, which makes an excellent moment to appreciate not only the beefiness of the weapons in Serious Sam 4, but the bullet trails too. If there's anything I can confidently give this game, it's that the weapon handling is solid. The animations are a lot better, the screen shake makes them feel powerful, and again, the trails. It helps me to more quickly familiarize the spread of these weapons.
And now for a short editorial. Who is Lord Ackerman? He's pretty evil, that much is clear, but who is he really?
Oh, whoops, I accidentally pressed the waypoint marker. That was actually a mistake, but it gives me an opportunity to talk about it. Pressing this at any time will show you where you need to go. Useful if you get lost, I guess, but the funny thing about that is how it's never at any point necessary. You have the distance marker on the screen, and that's all you really need. The game is linear enough to know where you're going. The idea is appreciated, at least. Anyways, Bill Corwin goes on a tangent about a bully who picked on him in school growing up. I think it was at this point in my original playthrough that I felt this whole radio broadcast idea wasn't really going anywhere. So Sam finds a crate, which he supposedly hates.
I hate crates!
But there's something unique inside. He opens it to find...
The Syrian artifact of might.
that. Sam breaks the thing open and inhales it because how else were they going to logically get that into his nostrils? I mean, snorting? That would be a sight, wouldn't it? Oh, look, a skill tree. So as hinted at several times by now, this is where Sam will upgrade his... brain? To let the player do some new crazy things, or alter the game's mechanics somewhat. I'm gonna go through these as they show up in the game. The first one I got was Looter Shooter, which makes killed enemies occasionally drop items. It's very useful, but one may be persuaded to unlock it simply to access the following skills that you can later unlock when you collect another Syrian Artifact of Might. You can unlearn a skill at any time by holding the fire button on it. This means by the end of the game, the player should be able to experience every possible skill if they want to. Never all at once, though. There's only 10 of these upgrade points in the game across the 15 chapters. There are 17 choices. This is a meaningless scripted scene where Octanians are talking about human battle tactics. I think a lot of Serious Sam 4's design was sculpted in a way to make you feel immersed, but instead you just kind of forget the stuff that happens immediately after you've experienced it. This is one of those moments. I can at least appreciate it giving the player a reason to stop and stare.
I smell seafood! Octanians are coming!
These NPC one-liners are an example of a non-intrusive interaction that actually works. You know, it's in the background and they follow you around. It's not meant to take the attention away from the battle and helps to immerse the player. I mean, you could always debate that the player doesn't have to listen to the radios, but what if I could listen to the radios and fight at the same time, you know? Oy.
The processing will take place at the main square at 9 a.m.
Wait a minute, I recognize that. Is that not a familiar text-to-speech voice? It's kind of hard to tell, like, it really sounds like it.
Humans, there is no hope of victory. Surrender now.
Maybe I'm just going nuts or something.
My son, there are people up there. They need our help.
Ah, side objective, huh? So here's a new thing Serious Sam 4 does. Follow the blue trail to a secondary objective where you can get some goodies. In this case, you can pick up the assault rifle earlier than usual. Otherwise, you'll be waiting a while to get one on the main route. Up the stairs, you'll find Massimo Morena, the guy on the mural earlier, and his friend Paolo. In this rooftop fight, you'll come across the first instance of Octanians on combat drones. They're equipped with lasers and swarm the player to ensure aerial superiority. Usually these types of enemies really annoy me, but they go down so easily that they're honestly quite entertaining, most especially when you have automatic weaponry. Initially they had some correlation to these towers according to concept art, but those got scrapped. So here's Massimo again. See him over there? Make way for a cutscene where he's suddenly dead. How did he die? We will never know.
He is Massimo Morena, the hero of the Italian resistance, the spirit of Roma. Is that really how his story ends?
Yep.
Yeah, alright then. So Sam returns to Father Mikhail and Kenny to find an organ hemivore. These guys are from the Beta Orgae. They look like vampires because of an evolutionary advantage, so says Nitrixa. The vampires are unique. They'll essentially teleport from one area to another by diminishing their appearance to tiny bats, which you can follow around to pinpoint their next location. They also throw Five Nights at Freddy's-esque jump scare ghosts at you. There's another attack they can perform while they'll launch at you, and the player will have to perform a quick time event to escape. It's only triggered if the player is in their direct line of sight, and since you're constantly moving, it's quite rare to actually occur.
And now a message from Lord Akraman.
Shut up and look at that! A clear mural showing their fluffy origins! I guess new players at this point don't even know what a clear is, not to the following level anyways. In the meantime, the cringening.
Fuck your whole army! Come at me, you alien pendejos!
For the record, I don't blame the voice actor here, this writing is just a little weird.
Oh, I lost my shoe.
This becomes a running joke throughout the game, and, you know, I find it funny how the rookie is infinitely less cringy than the supposedly badass squad over here.
Nice shot!
Crap one-liner, though.
I wasn't trying to do a one-liner.
They'll also try and persuade Kenny into being more like them throughout the game, which kind of happens, and it just makes me think, oh no, please don't ruin this wholesome character. When they said Serious Sam 4 was an old-school shooter packed with one-liners, they meant that quite literally. They're just short of narrative-focused, and that's a point we'll be coming back to later. So then a firefight takes place. There are these parachutes that drop supplies from above. I like that idea. You know what would have made this so much cooler? If you could shoot them down to drop the supplies instantly. Just a thought. You know, every time they update this game, I go and try that again because I just think it's a really good idea, but no. So here's an LIFE, a lightweight intravenous fibroblast energizer that uses medical nanotechs to instantly improve your health with a single injection. You can use it anywhere at any time and it'll give you 50 health points. This can extend past the usual health limit. After that combat sequence, a Sagittarian Sidewinder pops out of the ground. See? Told you it was foreshadowing. This is an ancient war machine left over from one of Mental's last attempts to wipe out a civilization. They were thought to have all been destroyed, but guess not. I'm still waiting for Marcel Voss to make a video about this coaster type. You get to use this minigun for the fight, but only this fight. Say goodbye to it for a couple levels after, because balancing. Anyways, the Sidewinder shoots rockets from its, I don't know, flaps. Just keep firing away at it with the minigun, and it'll surely die. Easy peasy. So now Hellfire is here.
Speed bump! Woohoo!
And here's Carter. Chapter 3, 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Ezekiel went to the Valley of Bones. And the Lord said to him, "Can these bones live?" And Ezekiel said,
This is a Serious Sam game, just thought I should remind you of that.
"O Lord."
Heads up, good portion of this chapter discussion is going to be me questioning the tonal choices this game took. These things are probably more on the subjective side, but this is after all my take on the game. You may strongly disagree with the things I'm going to say about this chapter, and that's totally okay. Much as I wouldn't be upset with you liking it, I hope you aren't upset with me not liking it. So we all good? Let's continue. So this was the point where I felt like, this is just weird, why is Croteam doing this? These epic monologues, long character cutscenes, you gotta stop and question, like, who was asking for this? Even if you like this new approach, did you want or expect it before experiencing it? I mean, I'm not trying to be nitpicky with this script and drone on too much, but really? What about the older Sam games would even remotely suggest this being a natural evolution? If the execution was alright, then, I mean, maybe we could get into the groove of this being a recurring theme, but, it's not. And that goes beyond the cringe-inducing dialogue. Even the characters' movements I feel secondhand embarrassment for, which may persuade you to think they hired a really bad animator. But no, that wouldn't be the case, because this was all done in motion capture. This is something Croteam was very proud of, as they would show it off many times before we knew what game they were even using it for. I'm not sure if the tech is bad or not, but the performances probably were. All the movements feel unnatural and often don't reflect the emotion going into their voices. Not to mention how every character's arms seem perched forward a bit for every standing cutscene. They all end up looking like Barbie dolls. So what goes on in this cutscene? Well, we're introduced to Brand. He's head of operations for the EDF. Now with Father Mikhail, they need to figure out how to get him and the crew to the Vatican Library to collect the Holy Grail. They go over some options and decide the best way is via air travel. They can't do that because of the countless raider ships. Carter suggests they blow up the nearby volcano in order to divert the raiders out of the skies. In order to do this, they'll need to manually place beacons around the area to realign the satellite. Each member of the crew will split up and place the beacons in their designated locations. So Sam is just one piece of the puzzle here. Ooh, I like that detail. More of this, please. I was happy to see that this ex-soldier would kindly point me towards the next target.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. This is Bill Corwin with Memories of Earth. Remember going to the ball game?
More useless gabber. By the by, I think the voice acting for Bill Corwin is engaging and keeps me interested. I just wish the context of it all was something worth being interested in. That being said, there is one piece of dialogue towards the end here that may imply something related to the tone of Serious Sam 4. I'm not entirely sure, but Corwin says,
Taking it all way too seriously because we knew it didn't matter that much. As opposed to now, we have to laugh about everything because it's way too serious.
So what I took from this is that Sam's badass platoon act the way they do, and subsequently Sam in the continuing timeline, because they're using silliness to cope with the hardships of battle. Did we really need to change the perception of what makes Sam the way he is? I mean, we all mutually thought of him to just be a goofy guy, right? Someone who doesn't take the invasion seriously, laughs in the face of competition, and boldly fights without second-guessing his life, which is constantly at stake. Alas, this newly revealed idea changes that perception. It all felt a bit strange to me.
I got a bone to pick with you.
So this is a clear skeleton, an iconic enemy in the Serious Sam series. Prior to being skeletonized, these creatures were bipedal mammals from the planet Clear. Their bones are held together by technomagical links, which seize functionality once an amount of damage is given, killing the reanimated creature. May I make the suggestion of using a close-up double-barreled shotgun blast? The distance required between you and a Clear in this Serious Sam game seems to have been decreased in order to get you that guaranteed kill. That or it's just a more powerful weapon this time. The Clear's attacks consist of throwing twin chain balls, or using their sharp claws as a melee attack. Be aware of their huge leap, which the player should consider as a great time to whip out that double-barreled shotgun. So here's another form of interactivity in Sam 4, picking up notes left by people long gone by now. A few of these have some interesting tidbits, but for the most part they're being used to bring attention to a side objective. This time, you're told about a set of keys that'll unlock this great cache of goodies in front of you. All the while, this weird pattern of lines sweeps through it. Weird bug. The note references a Dr. Stein, who is referred to again in Serious Sam 3. We never actually meet Stein, which leads me to believe they're waiting for the next prequel to give him some showtime. Kinda weird how there is indeed a professor in Serious Sam 4, but he's called Kiesel, who, right, he does have a bit more of a role in this game. He developed the Natrixa message board, so I guess that's kind of important, but it doesn't really change anything. Did I mention yet that Jones in Serious Sam 4 is the identically named brother of the Jones you meet in Serious Sam 3? If you're asking why right now, well, that's a good question to be asking. You know, this landscape is perfect for a giant Octanian Harvester Leviathan off in the background somewhere. We haven't seen any of those since the first chapter. Where have they gone? Well, don't expect to see them too much going forward. They're not common in this game. My best guess is how this isn't a residential area, so there's no reason for one if they can't process any humans here. I'm sure it's related to optimization, but it sure is underwhelming when you blow up a giant horde of kamikaze only to find no remains. Even in the classic game, if it lagged your computer, well, that was part of the experience, you know? So now I'm back at that goodie cache, and this is a canister of Rage Serum. Use one and the player enters a state of euphoric rage. What does that mean for you? Well, weapons fire faster, do more damage, the player takes less damage, you move faster, basically temporary steroids for you and your weapons.
Hey, Hellfire. Is it true about you and Sam?
Is what true?
You did it in the helicopter while fighting off harpies over Beijing?
Don't be stupid, Rodriguez.
Hey, it's just what I heard.
There were no harpies in Beijing.
You know, for a series that only releases a game like once every 10 years, you would think they'd not be so trigger-happy to reference future prequels so often. I think this is the first time, but by the end of the game they suggest like 7 or more previous adventures. I guess Croteam intends on fulfilling them, once they've all retired and the studio is completely replaced. Funny how I've got so much bad to say about this chapter, and yet the actual gameplay is not bad at all. I actually like this level. It plays alright, the level design is alright, and it can be pretty, though I'm not sure if this kind of environment is well suited for Serious Sam in general. So you know what photoscan technology is? It's when an artist essentially copies and pastes real-life environments by scanning photographs and turning them into textures. I think in some cases models as well. I feel like this, while surely cuts down on resources and labor, unfortunately limits their creativity. I don't find a modern environment really works that well for a game like Serious Sam. I'm aware that this concept isn't too dissimilar from the classic games. The first game in particular used real-life locations as the basis for several stages. The thing about those is that they didn't seem too bothered when a location wasn't uber-realistic. There were moments where, to apply a real-life location, you'd have to stretch your imagination a bit. They were better suited for arena combat in the classics, whereas in Serious Sam 4, I would say every inch of the game is designed to accurately resemble existing locations. Instead of designing an arena shooter around real environments, you're designing real environments around an arena shooter. Get used to a lot of sprinting from one place to another, because even Croteam knows when certain environments just aren't suitable for combat situations. But you'll get these environments anyways, because realism. So this is where you get the grenade attachment for your single shotgun, acting as the secondary fire. It is an extremely important addition to your arsenal, so don't miss it, because I've done it twice in my 5 or so playthroughs of this game. I'm not an explorer when it comes to video games. People often question why I still don't know every secret for the classic Sam games, and it's because I don't really care. I'd prefer to move on to the next arena, really. I had to completely change that point of view for Sam 4. It's not a bad thing when games try to change your playstyle, so I'm not really against this. I managed to get into the flow of it over time. The actual problem lies in how important some of this stuff is. If you happen to skip this secondary objective, you will never get the chance to collect this attachment again in your playthrough. So this isn't much of a secondary objective to me, it's more like a primary one that you can end up skipping. But you'll suffer from that. Anyways, first beacon set. Now it's time for the best looking model in any Serious Sam game to date. You don't have to be a scaly to appreciate the look of this thing. It's such a great design and the animation is perfect. Like, look at what Croteam is capable of when they're not using mocap and photo scanning. This is it. Eludran reptiloids are the last surviving descendants of the Eludran system. They gladly joined forces with Mental in exchange for their spell casting abilities. These spells include throwing green fireballs with basic homing. They don't usually deal in close combat, but will provide a nasty smacking if you do get too close. There's a pretty good secret here. Pick up a pill and a beheaded spawns down the hall. Pick up 2 on the other side, 2 beheaded spawn in the other direction. Keep progressively picking up pills and progressively killing the beheaded until you're freed, only to encounter Secret Big Rocket Man Pyrone. You remember how Serious Sam games often had ridiculous secrets like this? These games were pretty iconic for it. Oh, how nice it is to see Serious Sam 4 remembers this silliness. Remembrance is about as good as you can give this game, though, because I could count on one hand the amount of times the game does stuff like this. I am at least aware of the game's secrets since I have watched Decino's 100% playthrough on the Serious difficulty setting. So here's our second Syrian artifact of might. I'm gonna go for dual wielding. This enables single-handed weapons only, so in other words, just your knife and Desert Eagle. Don't underestimate the dual deagles. They are extremely useful and have unlimited ammo. It comes in handy for limitless encounters. But that's only really true in Serious Sam 4, where they actually let you hammer the fire button. So anyways, here's another new enemy, the Octanian Zealot. Basically the modern equivalent to the classic Cucurbido enemy, but also Pinkies from the recent Doom games. The Cucurbido has a much better design than the Zealot, and you can quote me on that. They don't look bad at all though, don't get me wrong. So the Octanian Zealot is a crusader of the Sigma Octantis system. Their goal is eradicating all knowledge. They are bred for iconoclasm, which is the elimination of icons, images, or monuments of religious or political intentions. In this case, they seek to destroy all that offends Mental. Their big hammer is easy to avoid by sidestepping, much like the Clear's launching attack. They are heavily armored, so either use an explosive up front, or shoot them with projectile weaponry from the back after they've swung their hammers. So this bloater wasn't bothered by my presence, or the screaming processed. Alright. Oh, now he's moving. Okay, wait, where is he? Oh. So, I'm actually stuck on this guy now, but killing him means taking damage. I have the health to survive this, but I don't want to. Not like I have a choice in the matter.
An authentic ancient Roman rocket launcher.
Alright, found the rocket launcher. This thing shoots rockets, and it's pretty cool. Here's another note. This one references an ancient device able to send 1 or more people back in time. Something called the Time Lock. Interesting. Whatever. Off to the side, here is another new gadget, the Time Warp. It generates a large field in which time is dramatically slowed down. However, the player remains at full speed. Basically a Matrix action scene in the form of a baseball.
Sam, I can't raise Jones.
And that's because a Knoom has caught him, and he doesn't seem all too bothered by it. These are an evolved species from a distant planet in another solar system. When Mental encountered them, they recognized his superior military and willingly joined the Horde. They are extremely strong, taking a lot of force to be downed. Only explosive weapons are particularly useful against them. They will charge at the player, as well as throw 3 fireballs that arc around the player, making it difficult to sidestep. This first encounter serves as a mini-boss, but it's quickly over. The Knoom dies in the same spot as a beacon hole, so Sam shoves the thing right through the Knoom's skull, and it looks pretty bad. Sam's hand isn't even holding the thing, and the Knoom doesn't even interact. Whatever. So Sam shares an intercom exchange with Quinn back at headquarters. Sam's squad is supposed to give the okay when they've cleared the perimeter so that they can launch the volcano. Unfortunately, due to some bad interference, they can't quite make out what Sam is saying. General Brand demands they go through with the plan regardless, so now the volcano is erupting as was planned, with Sam and the crew caught in the crossfire. Chapter 4: Gates of Hell. The next chapter loads, and it's apocalypse time. I guess Sam was just standing there for the last hour or something, for the area to be in this state. Run forward a wee bit and we're introduced to space mummies. Sam discovered these creatures on the battlecruiser Saratoga. Don't get that confused with the Starship Surveyor. As far as I'm aware, Saratoga came after the Surveyor. Whatever, Sam called them space mummies. These guys throw fireballs at you, which you can just sidestep to dodge. Unlike other enemies, its weak spot is not only in its head, but also in its stomach area. Fun fact about these guys is that they use the same sound effect as water golems from the original Serious Sam Alpha, which were also used for the final boss sounds in Serious Sam Advance. Space mummies are seldom used in the game, but I think that's a good thing because they are just not very fun to shoot at. Also, their melee animation often doesn't line up properly with their heads, so it's a little strange. Sam's friends, specifically Hellfire, are waiting for everyone to regroup in a nearby jeep to get the heck out of there. The idea was to exit via a helicopter, so this might seem a bit strange until the following mission where that's explained. They were all supposed to leave together after regrouping. I feel like that gives the raiders more time to show back up again, but, well, what do I know. Anyways, Professor Kiesel has a request for us. He wants samples of burned enemy limbs so that he can do studies on them. So follow the secondary objective waypoints to collect all 5 pieces. None of these pieces will have the player stray too far off the intended path, so there's no reason not to pick them up. If you do, the following level will be introduced with a new rocket launcher piece. More on that later. You collect the sniper rifle for the first time in this chapter, which can immediately be used to shoot a lost Gunnar on top of this volcano. Can't see it? Neither can I, but it's there. Shoot it and you're teleported to this confusing area with many female Gunnars being hung by their legs on trees. Seconds after, you'll be placed back where you were. This isn't recognized as a secret in the game, just an Easter egg. A very strange one at that. You run into the first instances of arachnoids here, starting with the hatchlings. You will rarely come across these guys. If I were to make a guess, I think they show up in 3 of 15 total chapters. There's a lot of enemies in this game that get very little screen time, kinda like Serious Sam 2. I'm not opposed to this per se, as there's already a good variety here. The fights of the classic games had an easily identifiable formula due to its limited roster. Overall, it might have been the better choice not to prioritize equality in Serious Sam 4 for that reason. It's just a strange parallel considering how the arachnoids were part of that familiar formula in earlier Sam games. But I guess people don't like hit scanners. Huh, who would have guessed it? Anyways, these arachnoids are holy warriors from a race of anthropods. Their society was considered very religious, even before Mental was involved. He was seen as a messiah to the arachnoids, leading them to believe Mental was their source of salvation. So, of course, they fight to the death. These hatchlings have underdeveloped armor, and thus are much easier to take down than the adult counterparts. They shoot at long distances with their chain guns, which you'll need to hide from to evade. They have no issues in close combat either with their painful stinging tails. Generally though, it's the adults you want to be aware of. Their advantages are tenfold what the hatchlings bring to a battle. Here's this goofball, the Draconian Pyromaniac. These characters are the last remaining of an evolved species. They are considered fanatical fire worshippers who don't even serve Mental. They literally just exist to cause chaos. Strangely, to the player in particular, nobody else. That isn't explained. Nonetheless, they use flame-propelled jetpacks to fly around the place, dropping balls of fire to the ground. They can also use a flamethrower at close range. I found a great choice for killing them is using C4. We don't have those yet. Oh hey look, C4! Other than for killing pyromaniacs, I usually forget these exist. For this chapter in particular, there are a lot of destructible areas to throw them at. This is an idea that is largely forgotten outside of Chapter 4. So, take a look at this part here.
Sam, hurry up. It's hot enough to fry an egg on the hood.
Alright!
Pretty typical gameplay, right? Well, as it turns out, I missed something very important. Just past this gate, if you turn to the left, there's a Syrian artifact of might. But the waypoints ahead are telling me to go anywhere but there. Why did it have to be there, instead of up here where the rest of the stuff is? I guess because they really do want you to explore in this game, but it just seems silly to trick players into not experiencing the stuff that the game should be encouraging you to experience. I had to reload my save for this level after completing it once I found out that I missed this thing. Remember, you only get 10 of these in the game, and in several instances like this, they can be easily missed. For the upgrade point, I went with Dual Wield Harder, which lets Sam dual wield two-handed weapons. Let me tell you firsthand, this rocks. Sure, it does increase the spread, but when you're actually holding down the fire button, you don't notice it that much, unless it's the minigun. Weapons do a lot of damage as is in this game regardless, so I wouldn't say it's a big issue. I know a lot of people complained about this, but I never really had a problem with it. Other noteworthy events in this chapter begin when Sam finds Kenny pinned down, whom of which he rescues.
By the way, this type of situation, perfect for fire-based one-liners.
Alright, Serious Sam 4, we get it. The two move onwards and come across one of Lord Akramon's witch brides, which is another mini-boss. Much like other species, they were faced with the potential destruction of their own kind by the hands of Mental. Initially, they agreed with a deal from Lord Akramon, but were deceived and overwhelmed by his dark powers. This transformed them into the witch brides you see in the game, who do nothing but serve as another puppet in his army. They have mystical powers, which blend themselves between realities, as well as quickly dash from one place to another. As such, they can only be harmed when fully visible to our own reality. Meanwhile, the Witch Bride will pick up and throw nearby debris in an attempt to wound the player.
Kenny! One-liner!
Stop. They rendezvous with Hellfire, then get the hell out of this fire. Oh no. Oh, the game, it's making me say things. Chapter 5. The Die is Cast. So we made it to Chapter 5, and I think this one is really boring. Which you wouldn't expect from what is perhaps the best cutscene in the game. If only for Sam punching General Brand, which looks very silly. No one makes a sound. Sam just whacks Brand in his face moments after his incredibly stiff stroll up to their hideout.
What the hell happened out there?
Stand down.
I can't get over this Brand character. Why is it that everything he says has to be so overly dramatic?
Maybe one day you'll find yourself in my shoes. And then you'll understand.
Oh my god, look at that man in the back!
The plan worked. The Raiders are down, but there's been a hiccup.
Carter and the Delta team escorted Father Mikhail to Rome, headed to the Vatican Library. I guess they didn't need to regroup and left without the rest of them. Whatever the case, HQ has lost contact with them for an unknown reason. Now it's up to Sam and Rodriguez to find them. The mission starts with Sam announcing his new rocket launcher modification, which you only get if you collected those burned limbs in the last stage. This is the multi-rocket mod that lets you fire up to 5 rockets at once. Additionally to this, the function enables homing, perfect for flying enemies. Like this guy here, the Colopsy. If the Belcher was a Methug soldier from Serious Sam Advance, then these would be the commanders. Colopsies are bizarre creatures that resemble a brain with a mouth. These guys don't just dart around the screen, they fart around the screen. The origins of this creature are unknown, but are speculated to be the result of some kind of weird experiment in Mental's labs. They shoot homing projectiles, which can be difficult to avoid. Immediately after, we're introduced to the spiders. They have a longer name that I'm going to try to pronounce. Zubinacrabian spiders. These were once innocent creatures that the Syrians would keep as pets. Unfortunately, Mental transformed them into killing machines, and they are now considerably larger than they ever were on Sirius. They can shoot acid or bite the player at close range. There are smaller, younger variants called nymphs. The only notable difference is their size and health. You can also melee those ones without first upgrading. It's really just the same animation used for the spiders in Serious Sam 3. How about another fun fact? The nymphs are often thrown at the player in large numbers. The game will often lag when this happens. My modding friend Danny S helped to point out a lot of this stuff to me, which made it pretty funny to put into perspective. This lamp is a bit of a meme, made up of 40k polygons, because that's necessary. And how about this statue? I mean, geez! This kind of stuff is littered throughout the game, which is probably why so many people have issues running it. Simple statues can have over 100k polygons! And trees, of which there are an abundance of, reach up to 70k each. You gotta stop and ask, why? What happened to the optimization? Anyways, as of last mission, I have dual wielding now, and oh, it's so good. Blasting the process with 2 shotguns will never stop being fun. We've got snipers. In my first couple playthroughs, I kinda hated these guys, but I've come to enjoy their challenge. They have a sound cue and a visible laser to cue in the player to their presence. They're quite fair, though there are a few instances where the game puts a reliance on them. This is a bit less fair, but I can't say this wasn't fun to deal with on occasion.
Yep, we got him!
This is where you'd first pick up the assault rifle if you didn't get it on the side objective in the second mission. Yeah, that's a while to go without it, but I guess it says more for the game wanting you to pay attention to those secondaries. Shortly after, you'll find yourself in this urban area with snipers, kamikazes, Gnar, and it's not very fun. The whole area is clouded with light fog, which really waters down the saturation. Not quite the presentation I'm looking for, but I guess it's still an improvement over the first couple levels in Serious Sam 3.
Gotcha!
Yep, that's a texture, alright. Ooh, here's where you pick up the very classic-inspired grenade launcher. This thing looks cool, and it's fun to shoot as well. However, you are going to be waiting a lot longer for the grenades to blow up than in the classics, which some have pointed out as quite a bummer. Nonetheless, it is a powerful and very useful weapon, especially when we get the cluster modification, which actually happens very soon. This level, in fact. Something I found kinda disappointing was how in the pre-release videos, this thing would shoot grenades with a visible flame effect surrounding it, but in the final release there's nothing like that. What a shame. So here I was thinking of the best way to approach this horde. But there's no need for thought when Rodriguez is around. In this fight, we witness some Octanian shielders who shoot a barrage of homing missiles towards the player. These guys can be a pain and gather a lot of damage if left sitting for too long. Kind of like biting into a pizza you left to overcook. Just toss an explosive in their direction, because it's the best way that I've found to deal with them. Does that belong in a museum or on the battlefield? So here's another secondary objective. You're gonna find something that may belong in both a museum and a battlefield. Before you start, though, be sure to walk 24 or more feet forwards past the objective because that's where you're gonna pick up the cluster mod for the grenade launcher. Yep, Croteam yet again with their questionable item placement. So first off, you'll be pressing switches followed by tackling hordes of monsters. All the while, the game decides to blind you because that's the effect they decided to go with whenever you're nearby a portal. I had a review copy of this game before it came out, and this effect was a last-minute addition because it wasn't there when I first played. My second time playing after the day one patch, I thought something had gone wrong, but no, this just looks weird by choice. In this battle, you should take advantage of the cluster mod for the grenade launcher. This lets you detonate grenades mid-air, which scatters smaller explosive segments across the ground. This is excellent for crowd control, given the crowd isn't close enough to suffer the splash damage. Something that occurs during this battle is the player's introduction to a biomechanoid major. A very underwhelming introduction since it just shows up unannounced. Compare that to its epic introduction in Serious Sam 3. These biomechanoids were made with the same materials Mental used for creating the smaller blue ones. While those shoot lasers, these large red ones will shoot rockets. Be careful, once agitated, in other words close to death, they will shoot multiple rockets at once. A very dangerous attack. You know, when I first played this level, I was expecting maybe a boss fight or something to be here, or at the very least some giant beast for Sam to focus all his firepower towards. Remember when the Serious Sam games would occasionally have some tanking beasts? They were rare enough to surprise you, but often enough to be considered a noteworthy aspect of the games. This place looks ripe for a Reptiloid Highlander, and the funny part is that they already had the smaller variant to use for it. All they had to do was increase the size, change its hue to red, and set the fireball properties to directly home in on the player. With even greater technology today, and the few bosses in Serious Sam 4 that prove such scale is possible, why refrain from it? Once this objective is complete, you're rewarded with portable black holes, another gadget you can use in battle. When deployed, they will suck in all surrounding enemies, big or small. It takes a moment as they hover into the circle, but their fate is already decided. It's a neat gadget on its own, but once you've picked up another specific gadget down the road, it makes this one's existence redundant. Or vice versa, you decide.
Quinn?
We fucked up the volcano, and the volcano fucked up the radio.
Well, that's the best explanation we're gonna get for why they couldn't reach Carter and the Delta team. Which you'd think HQ would have came up with on their own, not for the stereotypical idiot character of the cast to just bring up nonchalantly. Chapter 6. Morituri to Salutant. Sam's off to the Colosseum. Between here and there, typical Serious Sam stuff happens.
We now go live to our science consultant, Professor Kiesel.
We haven't heard from Bill Corwin for a while. Well, actually, there has been a few since the last one I talked about, but I didn't bring them up because I didn't want to waste your time. Sorry for wasting your time.
Pasta in Bologna.
Oh yeah. Now fellas, this is a weapon to be weaponed with. Reckoned. The auto shotgun is a beast that runs through ammo very fast. A suitable mechanic for a weapon that rips through enemies very fast. It's like the shotgun, but automatic. What more could you want? It does reload after 20 shells, but it's short, so no matter. Well, here's another Syrian artifact of might. What am I gonna go for this time? Well, dual wield with a vengeance, of course, because now we can dual wield even the heaviest of weapons the game has to offer. Can you say devastating firepower?
Are you the one they call Serious Sam?
The one and only.
So this guy wants you to sign his rifle. Shoot some bad guys, and then go sign his rifle.
Enjoy the shooting. Yours sincerely, Kenny the Killer.
That might be the best joke in Serious Sam 4. No, wait, this is the best joke in Serious Sam 4. So this is yet another gadget, and it does pretty much exactly the same thing as the portable black hole, except this one kills everything near instantly rather than when they've been sucked up into a black hole. Not like it really makes a difference either way. But the more you think about this thing, the more puzzling it is to a seasoned fan like myself. A mini nuke launcher? What about the Sirius bomb? Which at this point I'm convinced is a thing that Croteam just hates. Time for nitpicking. So in Second Encounter you invent the Sirius Bomb deployed by pressing a button on the keyboard. Isn't even a weapon model. The game gets ported to the Xbox where it's a true part of your arsenal now, because assigning a button on a limited controller wouldn't be ideal. Serious Sam 2 is coming, so you guys make this thing, what is this thing? Which you turned into the Sirius Bomb later in development, probably because people were asking, what is this? For the HD remaster of Second Encounter you bring it back because, well, the original execution for it in the Second Encounter was pretty stale. Ever since then, we've seen nothing of this thing. Yet Serious Sam 4 made for the perfect opportunity, but nah, it's nuke launcher time. Fans would have been far more excited to see the Sirius Bomb come back instead. It's your brand recognizable image, why not use it? Ultimately, the mini nuke launcher, while not the worst idea on its own, nitpicking aside, is redundant when considering the portable black hole. The gadget list is starting to feel rather bloated.
The war to save the Earth has cost us many good friends.
What is this noise? Oh my god!
Request. My mom always said, you got something to say. But if you do, never shut up until you say. But if you're hearing this...
God damn it, this is actually an important broadcast for once. Why do you assholes have to intervene?
Looks like the bad guys got me. But I still have something to say.
Well, well, well. The mighty hero has reached the grand arena.
Lord Ackerman monologues for a while.
Oh, I'm only just getting started.
Simply delicious.
Pretty cool Colosseum battle all before this gigantic crab boss fight. It's actually called a swamp hive. These creatures are based on smaller organisms from the planet Valtos, where its long legs would be used to hunt for food. You know, kinda like deep-sea squids. You remember the Rage Serum? Usually I don't care to use this, but there's actually a hilarious way to break this boss fight. It's not a bad boss fight really, it's just funny to see how broken this gadget makes it. Just after this battle, Rodriguez pops up from underneath. The two are now on the direct path to locating Carter and Father Mikhail. Chapter 7. When in Rome. Sam and Rodriguez locate Carter and Father Mikhail.
Father, just tell me how to get that thingamajig.
The team is now en route to the Vatican Library in order to find an ancient book that'll tell them the location of the Holy Grail. Just after escaping this practical prison that Carter and Mikhail got trapped in, you'll face up against more of Mental's minions. I'm not sure if this comes across as well on video, but at least playing this is so frickin' fun. This is what the game needed, man. More enemies charging at you on a linear path. You know, it's the trademark Serious Sam running backwards formula. Thankfully, a good portion of this level has a grasp on what made the classics fun. Not to mention, this level has probably the best music in the game. Oh, well, here's another funny secret. I was hoping we'd see more nonsense like this. Now, I'm not sure if this was intended or not, but you can just jump into the water on the side and the kamikaze AI doesn't know what to do, so they just stop. This must be intentional, right? There's not a chance this was an oversight, right? Oh, come on, man. Where'd all the gore go? How unsatisfying. Should I blame this on my PC? I don't know. Maybe. For the record, these are the settings I'm playing on. In the past, I played Serious Sam HD on a fairly low-spec computer. At the very least, that game would have some bloodstains surrounding the explosion. So here's a new side objective. The reward being Rage Serum. What, just one? I mean, alright, I guess I'll go kill hundreds of monsters for something I won't use. Killing monsters is what I'm here for, so sure, why not? I like how this guy is literally just standing here, in the middle of nowhere, for no real reason. I'm not anywhere near his age, and even I'd be tired standing in one spot like that all day. Do they not have, like, benches in Rome?
Please, I need help.
So this guy wants us to check up on his daughter Gabriella, who went to her lab yesterday but hasn't since come back.
Please, I am an old man. I cannot fight.
Sure thing, Pops.
Sam, what are you even looking at? How? How'd she do that? A lot of people have compared this interior area to the second level of Serious Sam 3, and how it looks far worse. There's no real lighting in here, it just works with the sunlight projected from the windows. One counter-argument I often see is that they compare the game to the 2017 Fusion release of Sam 3, which enhanced these details. It's in their backlog at this point, so I mean, the comparison is still valid in my opinion. Nonetheless, I went back to look at the original release of Serious Sam 3 and... yeah, this still looks better. I guess they were thinking, well, how much can we really do to make this still inhabited building look nice? Can't fill it with shrubbery, can't design it in ruins. I'm no expert in art direction, but I've seen some nice video game interiors before. That second level of Serious Sam 3 does make for a valid comparison. There's attention to lighting detail there, which for the most part is what Sam 4 lacks in these indoor environments. You come across this note that talks about the space-time oscillatory non-cohesion effect. In this text it refers to historical inconsistencies, which is a rather complicated subject that the note doesn't really elaborate on. It does expand on why this might be happening though. An object or perhaps person has been traveling through time, affecting the timeline on a regular basis. So perhaps the timeline makes sense after all, but only if you take this individual into account. I wonder who it could be. Perhaps an alien? Spoiler alert, it's Serious Sam. This feels like both a callback to the older games and possibly a reference to this one as well. Could it be implying to us, the players, that many things Sam and his crew reference in the game are sensitive to this isolated timeline? And then with that question comes, is Serious Sam 4 even canon to the rest of the games? Which games make up the main canon? How do we really know if any of these games are connected? I mean, after Serious Sam 3 jumps into a portal and suddenly he's wearing a completely different shirt, are none of the Serious Sam games connected? Here I was thinking Serious Sam 5 would take place in Beijing or Peru, two places they refer to on several occasions, but maybe those comments were reserved for the game's usual method of comedy. You gotta admit, this whole branching timeline angle is getting a little overdone, don't you think? Following this comes a pretty good fight in an open arena setting. It's a bit short though. A wave of beheaded followed by werebills, clears, and one Canoom. Order up? Here's the next artifact of might. Now, I could get the Mix It Up skill to dual-wield two different weapons at the same time, but I gotta be honest, whenever I would unlock this skill, I'd find myself getting a bit disoriented. It's a great skill, but I'm far more used to handling one type of weapon at a time. So I'm not gonna go for that skill. Instead, I'm going for the Healing Punch. This skill makes it so that melee kills will heal you. It gives an actual purpose to the melee, since we previously established that in most cases, just using your knife's swing attack is better. I didn't choose this skill for the health bonus, I got it because once you unlock this skill, you can unlock other skills related to melee once you've collected more artifacts of might. Let's continue. Oh my god, it's a choppy boy! For us, a previously encountered specimen in Serious Sam 3, these technopolyps are cyber parasites built up of the same DNA used to convert other forms of Mental's army, as seen in this game. Despite fitting in perfectly with the existing roster, it is the only tentacle-looking creature from Serious Sam 3. One could imagine the original interpretation of this creature inspired a lot of this game's presentation. For what reason exactly, I can't tell you. The technopolyp is, as you've no doubt established, attached to a helicopter. Somehow this polyp has managed to gain control of it, and uses it to fight against the EDF. You can use any sort of weapon against it, but your best bet is to take it down using explosives. Once you've done so, you're faced with another highly satisfying battle on top of this bridge. And then there's this guy.
Hello!
What?
I hate worms. The whole city is full of worms.
I think this is the game's way of trying to create a meme. There's this guy obsessed with killing worms. He keeps saying the word worms with such emphasis.
Worms.
I feel like I should be laughing like, haha, funny worm man. But I don't know. You remember Pickle Rick? Everyone loved Pickle Rick.
I am lacking important substance. Hypermethylbenzole. Find it in pharmacy.
Sure thing, Pops.
Wait a second.
Sure thing, Pops. Sure thing, Pops.
Sure are a lot of pops in Rome. Wait, what the heck? Where did you guys come from? So you collect the stuff for Mr. Worm's Armageddon here, then bring it back. Simple mission.
Now all worms will die!
What?
But here, take this, and thank you, big gunman.
Sure thing, Pops.
This is the Psychotropic Grenade, used to turn enemies against each other within a green cloud radius. What do you think this smells like? Nitrixa says the effect doesn't work on humans, though they should avoid contact if possible. I don't think that caution translates to the gameplay at all. This is a fairly useful gadget. Infighting is always fun to see. At this point, I decided to play around with the skill tree a bit, since I do have enough points to customize. Now I've unlocked more skills related to melee, in particular, the ability to take down larger enemies. Oh snap, it's time to melee the Scrapjack! It's hard not to feel a bit disappointed when you compare this to the animation made for Serious Sam 3, although that can be said for just about all of them. At least you can melee far more enemies in Sam 4 than 3. Although, as we'll continue to see, they're all just knife kills. Even something as big as the Biomech Major, you just climb up a bit and stick your knife into its brain. So here's something I discovered while editing this video. Turns out Croteam actually removed several of the melee kills from the game since release. One of those being the Biomech Major. However, thanks to a friend Ecstasy, I was able to restore it into the game and show you what it looked like at one point. Kinda weird how these things can take multiple rockets or sniper rounds, but then a quick jab of your knife is enough to take it down. Okay, that's nitpicking, who cares? I can only wish these executions were a bit more interesting. What do you know, another excerpt. I've discovered this very late into the development of this video, because Nigmus just showed this to me. When The Last Hope came out, some Serious Sam 4 files could be found in its edit data. There exist a number of old melee finishers from the 2017 era, which for whatever reason were scrapped for the eventual knife kills. This goes to show that Croteam did have greater intentions for the melee at this point. Supposedly, even the IRIP melee from Serious Sam 3's Gunnar would have also been present, suggested by this dialogue found in the game by Sikor.
See, the eye comes out real clean, and then you can throw it at another hostile.
Is that effective?
No, but it's funny.
These scrapped animations clearly had a lot more effort put into them. I'm assuming they had to be removed due to conflictions in the editor, or maybe the newer models were incompatible. The final animations might feel so lazy because whoever had made these had already poured their heart out into it once. It's easy to lose that ambition knowing you have to start all over again. Quite a shame that we couldn't have seen these in the final game, as they really did look quite cool, and it brings more to the imagination of what Serious Sam 4 could have been if it was released long ago. Well anyways, there's an arena up next that's filled with Octanian snipers. I once hated this part because it forces the player to constantly take cover. I've warmed up to it over time. The battle itself isn't complete mayhem, so the snipers do a good job providing two things to multitask on. A brief moment between sniper fire is all you need to take down multiple enemies. So long as you understand how the snipers function, this is a good deviation to the traditional shoot fest. Oh no, a bunch of polyps are blocking the path. Luckily enough, there's yet another Pops.
Sure thing, Pops.
But this Pop ain't your ordinary Pop. This is Nana, a badass nanny with a plan.
This is not a war zone. This is Roma, my city, my home. I fight.
Chapter 8, Machina Ex Deus. Sam takes an alternate route, with Nana waiting up top to blast some fools with her minigun. We start off on another bridge, and we already know what that means. Awesome combat, of course. More awesome if you swap back over to the dual-wielding skills. Blasting countless rockets into a giant horde of clear is priceless. Why doesn't the game have more moments like this?
Don't shoot at my flowers!
Just be sure not to shit on the flowers. I do mean that earlier comment though. For a game with dual wielding, you'd expect them to design the gameplay better around this combat. Very rarely did I actually feel a need to pull out my maximum arsenal. It's even funnier once you've considered the gadgets because those are never really necessary. Also, there's a freaking mech. Getting a bit ahead of ourselves.
You take Nana's minigun. Careful, it is heavy.
You know, I feel like Nana is one of the few natural sounding characters in this game. Her voice is perfect for the model. The voice actress is actually a 74-year-old British woman, which was a surprise. What can you say except talented voice actors know how to play their roles?
Silly boy.
So we've reached the park, and this is another part of the game that people tend to really enjoy. Now look, I think the combat of this game is satisfying, and every time you get to truly unleash your arsenal, there's a lot of fun to be had. Alas, this environment here doesn't feel quite right to me. This area looks like a good place to start for an arena battle, in the editor. Now just remove this giant wall, get rid of all those trees, maybe level the terrain a bit. These benches here are just getting in the way. Maybe move these over to the last level so that old guy can actually, like, sit down. Probably the worst offender here is how you'll be coming in from the side of the park. All the enemies that spawn in are coming at you from an angle. It's very awkward. Maybe if Sam originated from the southmost point of the spawns, but even then this feels like another case of creating a realistic environment first, with gameplay second. I want to love this battle, and I think in many aspects I do, but the level design is just not one of those reasons. Well, time for another artifact. Okay, you know what I'm gonna do? There's this skill point I've been curious about for a while now. It's called Objection, Your Honor. You get the ability to pick up road signs and thwack or throw them at enemies. How the heck does this work? Huh, so they're highlighted now. I could walk up to them and pick them up. Interesting.
What ordinary minds call reality is an illusion.
Okay, I didn't really expect it, but this is kind of awesome.
Oh, yes!
So here's the freaking mech. Before the game came out, I was actually anticipating this thing, which is kind of weird because I'm not really into mech combat. I guess I just thought it was a neat thing for the game to experiment with. And yeah, that's what it ended up feeling like. An experiment. The mech combat is fine. You can dash, you can shoot explosive rounds, fire rockets, toss an ensemble of grenades at the floor. I remember in pre-release footage, everyone was talking about how the mech's minigun barrels don't spin. We were confident in this being fixed for the release build, and this, they still haven't fixed it. Your weapons need to reload if used too frequently, though the ammo regenerates over time so there's no worry of running out. It's a very powerful vehicle, one of several we're yet to experience because the second half of this game has more of a focus on them. I can't say the mech was a necessary piece of the game, but much like the other gimmicks, it's a neat deviation from the usual combat. Oh no, I'm stuck on an umbrella! Oh, there we go. Uh-oh, it's tentacle time. So here's another boss fight. This abomination is called the Megalopolyp, an enormous tentacled organism assembled from millions of protopolyps. Nobody's sure if this thing was created on purpose or it's just some freak accident of nature, but whatever it is, it must be killed.
What am I, a Japanese schoolgirl?
Sam, why? So just aim for this thing's head, fire all your weaponry and avoid taking too much damage while it throws stuff at you. The quick dash is useful here. Occasionally the Megalopolyp will hide its face using its tentacles, so at that point you just wait a moment for it to open back up while enemies spawn below. As per typical boss fashion, do enough damage and it's dead. After taking down the boss, Sam enters the Vatican Library.
Screw it. This should do it.
So in this update, they added an option to beep out the curse words. I don't have it enabled, but it happened here for some reason.
Found it!
Now that Sam has found the ancient book, they can finally discover the location of the Holy Grail. We've still got a lot to do because with the exception of one level, the rest of the game's chapters average at an hour's length each, compared to the usual half an hour of this and previous levels. Going forward, however, there will be less to point out. We've collected most of the weapons and gadgets already, and there's only one new enemy left, of which is revealed in the following stage. Save for a boss or two. The game focuses more on the combat from here on out, though the story continues to be told, so as such, we'll continue to summarize it. But without further ado, Serious Sam 4's most controversial chapter. Boy oh boy, a breakfast in France. Let me show you a clip of Croteam introducing Serious Sam 4 to their audience, with this demonstration of the Legion system.
Used in our latest and greatest game, Serious Sam 4, Planet Badass.
And they forgot to enable the audio. They only managed to fix it during the last couple seconds. This was a real Croteam moment. They teased a lot regarding this level. Gigantic battles featuring the Legion system, wildlife that would scurry about while you engaged in battle, massive landscapes, and a harpy. We did get two of those things. The landscape is most definitely massive, to a fault, and there are harpies. That's the last recurring enemy in the game, one of which is usually a staple for Serious Sam, but you won't see them all too often in Serious Sam 4. Give it a moment though, because we still have yet to take in the level's initial cutscene. So Sam and the team have taken to the skies, off to Carcassonne, France, the location of the Holy Grail as is written in the ancient texts they found. After learning about its secrets, Father Mikhail has warned them that retrieving this thing may not be such a good idea after all.
I am not sure our path is wise. Men died to hide it, to shield the world from its influence.
Whatever their reasons, we need it. We're gonna win this war, no matter the cost.
And what if cost is our soul?
I'll write them a check.
The team is intended to meet up with a French resistance leader known as Michel. They're the best bet for making it safely into the castle.
The resistance will get you into the castle. What was that? What the fuck?
Lost engine 2!
Gremlins are real!
Okay, how in the hell did I actually just laugh from something this guy said? Maybe because up to this point his banter was foolish but still intelligently presented? To hear him so freaked out with the 3 simple words, Kremlins are real, alright, you got me, that was pretty good.
Start bailing, now!
You heard the lady. Go!
Perfect reaction. Aircraft's being hit by the enemy, gotta bail, so just, you know, casually walk over to the exit.
I can't stick around.
So everyone lands in France.
Try to stay together. Don't get scattered.
They get scattered.
Hello? Anyone there? Yeah, this mission is going great!
So here's that harpy. You can stab him, of course. Oh shit, I'm not sure how that happened. The Scythian witch harpy is a topic of debate for the EDF science community. Some say it's a mythological creature from the past, others say they came from planet Sirius. Whatever the case, these harpies you fight are clones created by Mental. Nitrixus says their over-sexualized appearance is mere mimicry, intended to attract and confuse less intelligent primates, so they may be dispatched by the creature's razor-sharp claws. But, I don't know how stupid you'd have to be to feel attracted to what looks like a corpse that was hastily sewn back together. The harpies are easy to avoid. Their attacks consist of swooping down at you from above with a melee strike. They can also throw electric projectiles at the player, but it seldom happens in Serious Sam 4 unless they're really far away. Speaking of which, at any medium or greater distance, their model swaps out to a lower poly one, and the animation for it looks really jank. With higher specs, this lower poly model would probably show at a greater distance, but with how demanding and unoptimized Serious Sam 4 is, I imagine most people playing are going to encounter this at relatively close range. Another weird quirk with the harpy is how their bodies can occasionally disappear the moment you've killed them. So, I'm not quite sure what Croteam was thinking with the introduction here. As is rather typical for a Serious Sam game, at some point you lose your weapons and are back to the starting lineup. I don't usually care for when this happens, but I'm not complaining. What I am complaining about is them not giving you even a shotgun to take down the first couple waves. It's just you and a pistol. Dual-wielded if you got those skills, but I don't know, still feels a little weird to me.
There's my ride.
So, here's the motorcycle. It's one of the first things we ever saw regarding Serious Sam 4, back when they teased us with a short video of Sam driving down the road. Get ready to drive down the road a lot, because there's a lot of driving down the road. First, however, you'll need to deal with these Gunnar. Use your knife. Watch them shake their groove thing. I like to think Croteam didn't patch this out on purpose. Oh. You have the choice of going straight or turning around to the opposite direction. Here, after driving down the road, you'll come across a secondary objective, which will be a whole lot of fighting for 3 Rage Serum gadgets. This objective is a pushover. You'll encounter frequent large waves of monsters, which is potentially overkill for this reward, but whatever. Oh hey, look at that. We may not have deer, but at least there's a little wildlife in the skies.
This is the 3rd day since our plane was shot down by an Octanian raider. The French resistance has treated us with admirable generosity.
You'll start finding radios or recordings scattered about the game from this point on that are unrelated to Radio Free Earth. In this example, it's some guy talking about his experience with the French resistance. But as is a recurring theme in Serious Sam 4, these are kinda pointless. Well, you still can't destroy windows on the cars. But you can break wooden planks. What fun. Here's a wave of hundreds upon hundreds of kamikaze. This would be a terrifying sight in the classic games, as they could catch up with you pretty fast. You'd have no choice but to take damage. If this were like those games, I'd pretty much accept death here. But it's a modern shooter, so you can just run away from them, lol. I mean it, you could endlessly run away and never take damage. The kamikaze has become a very non-threatening foe. At least in Serious Sam 3 it kinda worked because there was usually only so far you could run. But since Serious Sam 4 works with such massive environments, you never need to worry about them. What kind of weird orgy is going on here? I think they're trying to climb out, but it's just not working. So far you might think I'm exaggerating the problems with this level. I am, I can't deny that. This stage is extremely ambitious, but I feel it's just for the wrong reasons. Not only does Serious Sam not need to have maps larger than Skyrim, but it gives much greater room for error. You've got so many environments with debris everywhere, and if you don't account for them all, then you end up with things like this. There's also something to be said about them frequently using this level in their promotional materials, so you kind of expect this to be their magnum opus, but it's not. This level is fine, I actually enjoy the combat quite a bit, but there's no denying that the scale is completely unnecessary. Did you know that at one point this and the following level were one combined stage? But they separated it because playtesters said they got tired. Yeah, once upon a time, Breakfast in France was at least twice as long. By the way, never try taking what you expect to be a shortcut through the forest because you'll get lost. Driving through the grass makes your bike significantly slower too, rightfully so, but yeah, don't do that. You can actually hold your weapon all the while and shoot oncoming baddies, but the reason to do that is always slim. It's far better to just get off your bike, take down the menace, and plop back on. Other vehicles in the game utilize this mechanic better, so do consider that for now.
This is Radio Free Earth with more news from Rome.
I like my guns like I like my enemies. Full of shotgun shells.
Geez, even the game doesn't want me to listen to the radio. I see they never fixed this glitched radio texture.
I don't know about you folks, but I think there's something really funky going on.
Next we come across this bell tower where two ladies have been hiding out. She asks for your help via intercom, so you go and help. As a reward, you get the sniper rifle, which I think makes this the best secondary reward the game has offered us so far. It's a very short objective, so you'd be stupid not to complete this one.
Oh, I'll have to ditch the bike. Bye, baby. I'll miss you.
Here's one of them signs again. This is so dumb. I can melee this guy now, I think. Hey, I guess there is an enemy you can melee that isn't just a stabbing animation. Well, the clear is another one too, but I'm really not sure what the deal is with that one. What, you just pat it on the head, and then you put your hand in its mouth, and then something happens? What happened to just ripping its head off in Serious Sam 3? I mean, that was pretty cool, and it probably took less effort to make that one too. Sorry, I've gotten into the habit of expecting a show. Okay, say what you will about Serious Sam 4 looking dated, but sometimes these nature environments look frickin' nice. Rip.
Namaste, mon frère.
Yeah, so this hippie dude thinks the aliens have come to make peace, but not really. Save him and you'll get access to this big old Combine Harvester, which may or may not be a reference to the Combine Harvester in Serious Sam Next Encounter. I'm really not sure, that's up for debate. Before you get into the thing though, follow that hippie for a little bit and watch how he disappears. I'd play a snippet of a My Chemical Romance song right now, but you know why I can't do that.
One man went to mow and murder.
Yeah, this is alright. Controls a lot better than the Harvester in Next Encounter. Sometimes the process will climb the Harvester. You can shoot them off by deploying your weapon. You can also just stay still and they'll run straight into the blades, because they're stupid. This Gunnar got stuck on my Harvester once in a different playthrough, so I took a screenshot. Pretty cute. Feller didn't want to get off. This is the face of my 2021 postcard. Moments after you get off the Harvester, you'll come by the secondary objective for a companion drone. This is one of 2 remaining gadgets we haven't seen. Kill off some monsters, you know, as you do, and then you'll be able to pick up some at the end of the trail. These Octanian drones can now be deployed, which follow the player while targeting any and all surrounding bad guys, giving them a taste of lasers. That is until they blow up. Not a bad gadget, but I usually forgot about these. Before you start the next level, Kenny has a traumatic encounter through the intercom. He's encountered some of them marsh hoppers from the classic Sam games, which are not in this one for some reason.
We're killing in marsh hoppers. Lots of them. They're no, I love frogs. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
He has to kill the hoppers, which resemble frogs. Kenny likes frogs, so that's bad news. Why am I pointing this out? Well, at some point I was informed that his dialogue is kinda broken, because you're supposed to hear him shooting the frogs, but due to a mishap the gun sounds are missing. Instead, Kenny just wails about frogs for a minute and it's very confusing. But anyways, pass through this area and you're on to the next level. The next level that was supposed to be a part of this level, but is now its own level. So much so that if you use cheats to bypass the end level barrier, the next level is still here. There's just some terrain missing, like buildings. You can even spawn enemies in, which apparently is a feature of the game for this and the following stage. If you stray off the main path, randomized enemy spawns will appear with increasing difficulty the more you wander. You know, this level just never ceases to surprise me. Chapter 10. One for the Road.
And now a message from Lord Agram.
Considering this is just a continuation of the previous level, there's not much lore to be expanded upon, or so you would expect. At the end of the level, something pretty dramatic happens, but we'll get there. Nonetheless, we start off in this secluded military outpost. Kill a couple bad guys, and then it's mech time once again. Starting off with a bang, are we? Can't say much about this fight that hasn't already been said the first time we went in the mech. I guess shooting waves of kamikazes with the explosive minigun rounds was pretty fun. I would say this is the best mech fight in the game, though there's only really 3 of them, and calling the last one an actual mech fight is negotiable at best. We'll get to that. So once you reach the end of the intended mech area, the thing goes low on battery. There was a funny glitch for a while where you could escape the boundaries with your mech and basically play through the rest of the mission with it. Anyways, once you've left the mech, Kenny will reach out to you via intercom suggesting a regroup.
Negative. Head for the town. We'll regroup there.
Yes, sir.
Oh lord, you hear that? Okay, let's just deal with this right quick. Oh no, the node is gone! Thankfully, at least you can still find them in Natrixa. So there's this guy named Fulbert who creates custom-built weapons. Don't skip this objective because your reward is a ridiculously overpowered chainsaw launcher that kills everything. I'm not exaggerating. For just a moment though, I'm gonna forget the objective because Croteam did that thing again where a skill point is just slightly further up on the main path. I'm gonna go this time with fire and reload even while sprinting. It does exactly as it says. Oh hey, what do you know? A radio. And it's not playing because the battle music's going. So now I have to backtrack and find out what enemy got stuck. Probably in the mech fight. Wait a minute. You're joking. I gotta backtrack on foot from what was a giant mech fight to find one small enemy that probably got stuck somewhere? Well, at least we have gadgets. Disregarding the fact that any other player could have used them all by now and would have to take a magnifying glass to this massive field. Oh, by the way, even if I didn't care about the radio, frankly I'm guessing it'll just be useless information again, this battle music will play for the remainder of the stage if I don't deal with this. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a requirement because I don't want to hear the same looping track for the next hour. Thankfully, the culprit is just this kamikaze who's going over that cliff.
He's going over that cliff!
Alright, he's dead, and the fight music's still going. Wait, who's all spawning over here? More kamikaze? Guess I killed the squad leader. Okay. So now I'm doing a mech fight on foot. Great. No big deal this time, though. Alright, fight music's still going. If you're wondering why I haven't used the gadgets yet, it's because they do have a large, albeit still existing range. This segment is huge, and I don't want to run through the limited supply of gadgets without fulfilling their purpose. Plus, using them here means I can't use them in future battles, though I'm not too worried about that since I've barely considered them thus far. So here's our next culprit, an Octanian doing the Melbourne Shuffle. Oh, that was it. Okay, great. No gadgets used. Now let's just run for a long time again.
Hello to all our listeners, and especially to those of you in France.
Oh, what do you know? It's more useless information.
Pasta in Balasta.
Back onto that side objective. There's some mad cows over here, and ladies and gentlemen, these guys aren't here to shoot, they're here to ride. Clear up some existing skill points and activate Rodeo Time, which lets the player ride certain enemies should you get up close enough and press the use key. I would say at no other point in the game is this skill necessary, it's mostly a gimmick. Here though, you're going to be running for a long time on foot otherwise. I'm pretty sure this cow farm here was intentional for the player to use this, even though you have to come to this conclusion yourself because prior to running out there's no indication that this would be important. When you ride enemies, you can still shoot your weapons. It works identically to the other vehicles in the game, the only difference is in how they handle. The werebull is very fast, so you can cover a lot of ground. I'll also mention that should you decide to stop riding an enemy, it goes back to its hostile state. Also, you can take damage while you ride them, so be just as cautious as before, else you'll lose your friend. Thankfully, there's a lot of werebulls in this area, so just get another one if this happens. Oh no, I lost my friend, and now there's no more werebulls left. So yeah, I guess that'll end up happening, but thankfully the game has a lot of fights between here and the objective, so there's plenty to occupy your time. You gotta love the melee animation for the vampires. This thing just casually accepts you climbing it, and then you stab it in the chest where it's all like, oh my god, I can't believe this just happened to me. There's a wave of kamikazes here, which actually kinda works because they come from all directions.
It was at this moment that he knew.
More specifically in front though, so the game is actively pushing you backwards. That wouldn't be a problem if I was encouraged to swoop back around, but no, with this environment all I'm gonna do is keep running backwards. So now I'm gonna have to do a lot of running back to the front once this is all over. A minor nuisance, I suppose? So you get to the top of this hill and now it's chainsaw launcher time. This thing resembles the standard rocket launcher, the only difference is it's red and, well, there are flaming rocket-propelled chainsaws where a rocket should be. This room is a hazard, and I don't mean because of all the unpredictable weaponry. I have crashed more times in this room than anywhere else in the game. Something about this room in particular makes the game just freak out. They may have improved the stability here since my last playthroughs, but even this time I got to a point where I had to reload a save. You can partially walk up this ladder, but then you get stuck. No matter how hard you try, you'll be trapped in this ladder. Or so I thought because I tried it again just for the lulz and it yeeted me upstairs. There's nothing up here, but I imagine I'm one of the few to actually get this far. So here's a tractor. somewhat faster than a wearable, and it's not going to give up nearly as fast, so I'm happy. Or as happy as I can be having to ride a tractor all the way back to the main objective while absolutely nothing of interest happens. No enemies, nothing. This gives me a moment to my own thoughts, which is a detriment in itself. Got me to think about how so many modern games have this auto-centering camera on vehicles. This is the kind of thing that I could understand being in a racing game where you need to face forwards at all times. But in Serious Sam, just let me entertain myself, please. I want to look around. I'm genuinely curious, does anyone think this was a good idea? I can't think of a single instance in this particular game where the auto-centering camera would be ideal. So back to the main objective, 5 minutes of driving later. Wanted to see if I could bring this tractor with me, but in terms of getting it through, it's fairly airtight. Getting past that, we're introduced to what a lot of people have said to be the best fight in the game.
That's a big hole.
You get the Devastator in this big hole. This weapon is like a heavily modified AA-12 auto shotgun. Instead of shotgun shells, it fires explosive rounds at such high speeds that it can even be used for sniping. It's incredibly powerful, and since Serious Sam 3, it's been one of my favorite additions to the game's arsenal. Haven't seen any of you guys for a while. This fight in particular demonstrates a key flaw in their design. They make virtually no sound as they creep up on you. Compare this to their precursor, the Cucurbido, which had a constantly buzzing chainsaw. You could never miss them. So what makes this hole such a good part of Serious Sam 4? The spawns are quite good. It's like a fight from the classic games, although the scale has been increased dramatically. This feels like the kind of battle Serious Sam 4 was building itself up to consist of. And what do you know, it's a massive environment that uses its scale properly. Wearables, clears, and biomech majors ascend from the top, giving you a lot of threats to consider and avoid. You aren't going to take down all those biomechs right away, so you're most likely going to have to dodge some rockets. Clears and wearables will charge at you, which is the most immediate threat. Take them down, and avoid the ongoing chaos. This, in my opinion, is top-tier Serious Sam level design. This lasts about as long as it took me to get the tractor back from the secondary to main objectives, so it's not that long, really. Don't be sad that it's over, be glad that it happened. Exit the big hole, and now finally after 15 years we can ride that ATV they teased for Serious Sam 2. They actually used that same Serious Sam 2 model as a placeholder in pre-release.
This is Bill Corwin with a bulletin for our listeners in southern France.
I don't know where this radio is. Is it attached to the ATV? Well, anyways, isn't it nice to be able to listen to this while fighting? Maybe a pocket radio would have been nice for the entirety of the game, instead of this one section. So this convoy radios in as you drive off in the ATV, which requests anyone in the area to come provide backup. Driving through the countryside in first person was kinda relaxing in a way. On occasion, I'm totally open to the game doing this, even if it's still not quite what you'd expect out of Serious Sam. I guess this series has become the focus of experimentation anyways, so hey, on occasion they can make something work.
Damn it, I'm too late. Sorry, French convoy dudes. Oh look, something to take this tragedy off my mind.
Here's the last gadget of the game, the HEART. This thing can be activated upon death to revive the player. You can optionally just reload the last save too if you don't want to waste it on a cheap death. Kinda suspect how the now dead soldiers had one of these at the ready and didn't use it, but whatever. This is a gadget I endorse. You won't forget about it because it's only useful in one instance, whereas the game makes you well aware of its purpose. You don't even have to use it. It's the kind of thing that makes the game easy on casuals, but affects nothing for the hardcore player who will probably ignore it. I guess you could say the same about the rest of the gadgets, if only those weren't redundant in and of themselves. The fight that follows is intense and makes the perfect scenario for the chainsaw launcher. Let the targeting system home in on an enemy, and it'll chop it to pieces in no time. Not only that, but it homes in on another target just after defeating the first one, and so on. It'll take down less heavier foes in succession, but smaller creatures are destroyed at a high supply. Very fun to use, and limitlessly satisfying.
Sir, I'm approaching the town. No sign of the others. I'll wait for you at the bridge.
This bridge wants to take my ATV away from me with those dreaded spike traps. While I'm no good at exploiting the game to bring other vehicles with me, this one I'm usually able to pull off. The first time I ever played Serious Sam 4, I brought it with me entirely by accident. You just gotta bounce over this ledge to get past the spike traps without hurting the ATV's tires. Sneakily push past these gates, and you're good to go.
So kid, you feel like you're part of the team now?
Because I'm leaving you, Kenny. Goodbye. You are no longer a part of my team. Or at least for a moment, whilst I ditch the ATV to uncover the neat Easter egg Croteam put here. Head on over to this corner and you'll hear some cheering. Pass through, then enter the stadium, and...
Welcome to the Football Glory Tournament, starring Croteam versus Croteam!
Football Glory is the first game Croteam ever made back on the Amiga in 1994. I made a documentary on Serious Sam once. It discusses this. You should go check it out. Anyways, back to the quad. The ATV makes no sounds anymore because the game doesn't expect me to still have it, but that's okay. Where we're going, we don't need sounds. Actually, I retract that statement. These sounds are very important.
Let's put the carcass in Carcassonne!
Not bad.
Thanks! I thought it was a little over the top. A little over the top.
Kenny?
Hello again, Sam.
Kenny!
Look who I found. Let me deconstruct this for you. You are not only outnumbered, but outdated. A relic from a time when people believed in heroes and causes and freedom. But deep down you must know, these ideas are myths.
Okay, real talk, this is the one story element of Serious Sam 4 that I actually really dig. The whole game so far, Ackerman has demoted the idea of heroes through his propaganda.
All throughout your history, you have elevated certain men and women, turning them into heroes. Your leaders die, your civilizations fall, your technologies turn on you. In the end, what have you accomplished? What is there to be proud of?
Just, ignore the happy, cheery music there. Now, there's a reason why I like this part of the story so much. Unfortunately, it's related to a spoiler that I'll save for Chapter 13. I guess now's a better time than ever to say, we're getting into the more spoiler-heavy parts of the game. Starting with what happens immediately after I end this monologue. You ready? 3, 2, 1.
Leave the kid out of it.
And why would I do that? Why in the world would I do that when I can just do this?
No! No, 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 no!
There goes another hero.
A little over the top.
Come back here! Come back here, you son of a bitch! Fuck! Damn it, Kenny. You bastards!
Stone! Over here! I am sorry to be meeting you under such circumstances. This way, mon ami.
Chapter 11, Vive la Resistance. I'm a Canadian, so I've heard 1 or 2 French people speak before. I commend the effort, but I kinda doubt this voice actor was French.
I know we do not always love the Americans, but today we do not fight for France.
Not like that's a problem, really, it just comes off a little forced. The voice is done by Rebecca Scroggs of UK origin. She did a good job presenting herself, it's just not quite the accent you would expect. I guess Croteam didn't have access to an actual Frenchie for this role.
We must get to the castle.
Wait a minute, that's Paulo from Chapter 2. Why is Paulo there? There's a conspiracy just waiting to be made. So Sam is finally caught up with the French resistance. They'll help him reach the castle where the Holy Grail is located. In gameplay terms, this means more NPCs will once again follow you throughout the stage. Never was a fan of friendly NPCs in Serious Sam games, and it's most certainly distracting in Sam 4 when they play the same pain sounds as our protagonist. I find it a little strange how Sam has always been a one-man army, which is relevant up to this point, yet he needs backup to help him to the castle? I guess these were the demands of General Brand, but we've never really known Sam to be the kind of guy to follow orders. Then again, if every Serious Sam game ends up being a prequel from now on, then I guess it's just character development, but backwards. Even prior to this, following orders usually gets Sam in trouble somehow. I guess we all got our breaking point. Starting up the stage, you're greeted by an inconsistent frame rate, which seems to be the case for most people playing this level. With a much better computer, that shouldn't be a problem, but regarding Serious Sam 4, for me, this was always the worst of the bunch. The running theory is that it's the most densely packed level in the game when it comes to rendered objects. Top that with the ridiculous poly count, and yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
The Russian sniper known only as One-Eyed Olga has taken out the infamous Octanian general Catapodius the Strangler.
Who the actual fuck is One-Eyed Olga?
We have sent someone to show them the way to the castle. They'll meet us there.
Alright. Alright. Anything that says auto shotgun in this game should be treated as a gift from the heavens, so count me in. Interestingly, this side objective pulls no gimmicks. You walk on over, can immediately pick up your auto shotgun. Of course, there's a massive horde of enemies to take down, but I mean, you have the auto shotgun, so what are you worried about? There's a really cool detail you might have missed. During one of the waves, this Octanian harvester actually lets out a bunch of drones from its insides. And then you're all like, pew pew, kablam, kerpow! This level does have some great gameplay moments, but is clouded with some very similar looking environments that better resemble a place for a cutscene than a battleground. There's this one fight just ahead where there's a bunch of rundown buildings and residential houses which just blend together. There's a few destroyed vehicles, which, I mean, it helps to give a bit of a variation, I guess, but it's not a lot. I have kind of a stupid theory, but I wanted to present it because I just find it so funny. So, Croteam uses photoscan technology for their games, right? This often means that they take trips to the places where their games are taking place, in order to take photos and apply them as textures once rebuilding the structures as models. The making of Serious Sam 3 alone demonstrates that they do in fact visit these locations as a form of both research and development. Croteam have made comments for years about their future plans with the Serious Sam series. In particular, they've referred to multiple different Earth locations for their next games to visit. And in Serious Sam 4, characters are talking about Beijing, Oslo. They're always talking about these extravagant locations. So, has anyone considered the possibility that Croteam uses their games as an excuse to go on countless vacations, which they then write up on their tax return as a business-related expense? With the way Croteam teases these things, it feels like every forthcoming game is gonna be Serious Sam, the wherever we wanted to go on vacation this time encounter. The reason I think this is a stupid theory is because we only really have one game so far to use as an example of this. Like, if this kept happening, then you could throw out your thinking emojis. But for now, it's just a funny thing to think about. Anyways. So here's another Syrian artifact, and I think at this point it's a redundant thing to keep talking about them. I have enough points now to experience any of the skills I want, I just have to swap them out accordingly. The only ones I haven't really talked about are on the left side, which are basically just character buffs. Take less damage from explosives, reload faster, etc. I'll be sure to mention once I've swapped out for anything particular in the coming chapters. Here's another side objective where this time you'll be without the NPCs. They've gone inside a nearby Resistance workshop in order to resupply their equipment. The fight that takes place here is quite good. Blowing up zealots with the Devastator is always fun. For completing what is a rather challenging fight, you get a holo decoy. So far, this has been the most useless side objective. All that for a toy, basically. I guess we have the satisfaction of knowing we assisted the French Resistance.
Mon ami!
Say it.
After another big shoot, the squad suggests they go into the sewers. Insert funny YouTuber reference here. They go into the sewer for no notable reason other than the fact that Sam will now have to encounter a giant arachnoid.
This is our informant!
He's what? What? Are you sure?
Please, human, remain calm. We are not all servants of Tahum the Mad.
This is pretty silly. And that's okay, because Serious Sam should probably have more goofy stuff like this. Even better, his name is Charlie. Even better than better, he dance. Sam and Charlie exchange their backgrounds with each other, which has Charlie tell us about the time Mental, or Taum as he will refer to him as, took over his planet. One interesting tidbit is how he says Mental only allies with the very worst people in each civilization.
They were, how do you say, blackhawks in English?
Traitors?
Assholes.
Basically, Charlie is part of a resistance group of arachnoids that actively try to fight against Mental and his army.
Cool!
I have the grenade launcher back, somehow, and Charlie, he dance. Charlie will play as another NPC for the remainder of the level. I can't say he provides much to the experience, if anything other than his slick moves, but hey, it's fun. The last part of this level is a lot of fun. In a phrase, pure mayhem. Activate the dual-wielding skill and let your weapons do the rest. It's not per se the most formulaic of Serious Sam gameplay, this felt more like shoot everything until it's dead. But that's fine. Any moment that lets me go nuts with this game's weaponry is a good time for me. So you know how I said Charlie would fight with you until the end of the level? Well, here's why. A raider crashes into this bridge and kills him. What a sad day. Okay, not really.
They're throwing everything they got at us!
Well, I guess if everything they've got is 3 raiders that didn't even attack us, then I'd say we've got this war in the bag.
Come, my friends. Let us show Tahum that the free peoples of the galaxy stand together.
Really thought he was about to break out in song or something. Chapter 12. In Carcassonne. This level is fairly unique for taking place in what is essentially a giant castle. There's some neat architecture here and there, but I wouldn't say anything is incredible per se. It's a lot of basic brick structures and cylinder stairwells.
Can you be more specific, son?
No idea. It all looks the same to me.
Well, the setting is notably different from the rest of the game, so it does stand out a little. Also pretty neat seeing all the cities off into the distance, even if it's a lot of the same buildings repeated over and over. There's also an Octanian harvester roaming the area. Always like to see that. The start of this chapter consists of some fairly basic fights, but it gets quite heavy at certain points. You'll hear a lot of the NPC character's dialogue playing throughout, but his device is still a bit glitched, so he can't respond to them just yet. Now, something I pretty easily noticed while playing this level is that Sam is entirely on his own. We've had some of that already, sure, but in this level Sam can't really talk to anybody, so we experience a more familiar side of Sam with his iconic ability to spout out one-liners without another character having to chip in every time. It's pretty refreshing, honestly.
Sorry, can't come to the door right now.
You can find a secret cannon here, and that'll end up being pretty useful. The cannon is an essential Serious Sam weapon that shoots arcing cannonballs with such force that it can tear through multiple enemies in one shot. The longer you charge it, the further it'll fly. Sure wish there were more of these secrets in the game.
Time for another editorial.
Yay.
If you spend some time listening to all that hot air, you'll realize there's not a whole lot there.
Couldn't have said it better myself, honestly.
Hey, you down there! Help me!
In this one scene, there's a princess who's stuck in a tower. As a side objective, you have to go save her, which will give you the master key used to open all storage facilities in the chapter. Pulled right out of her ass. Classy. This is a great idea for a side objective. I mean, hey, it's not just another gadget. It is a Serious Sam game though, so this whole rescue thing is still ridiculously awkward. And honestly, this part reminds me of something from, like, Serious Sam 2, you know?
I've been stuck in this fucking room for weeks!
Wow, geez, watch your language.
What I need now is a bottle of wine and a strong man. I have needs, you know? Come on, I have the master key. I'll take you to the break room and you can ride me like a...
Ma'am, I'm flattered.
Writers, what was going on when you wrote this part?
Hey, you know what? I know this guy. You're gonna love him. His name's Rodriguez. I'll give you his number.
The smile to haunt my dreams. Ooh, laser gun. I mean, it's about time, right? There's only 3 levels left after this one. Why did it take us so long to get this thing? Perhaps because it's really overpowered in this game. But anyways, time for a little pew 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 pew. It has a weird hum that plays if you fire it continuously. I've heard a lot of people say they hate that. I'm okay with it. Makes the weapon feel more powerful to me, but I can't understand why people dislike it. As this hum chimes up, so too does the damage, so I can understand why it's there as an indication. Well, we now have access to every weapon and gadget in the game. So forthcoming, no more to introduce there. Earlier in Chapter 5, we destroyed a portal. And here's Chapter 12's second portal, waiting to be destroyed nearby as another side objective. This will give you guessed it, more gadgets. Oh, and the objective is called Portal 2.
Ha, very funny.
This fight felt a little unorganized, but it's still entertaining. Just a lot of single-purpose enemies being thrown at you. There's a huge wave of kamikaze, and that's fun, I guess, if slightly uninspired. Stabby stab. Stabby stab stab.
And excellent.
Excellent.
Sam! Hey guys!
Chapter 13, Anathema Unto God.
Keep moving.
And if you're moving like that, you just might break your legs. So this chapter is kinda like a blend between the last and earlier parts of the game. It's part castle, part everything else. Getting back to the basics, I guess, although not exactly true since the 2 following chapters are going to be wildly different.
We here at Radio Free Earth are sad to report the death of One-Eyed Olga.
No, not One-Eyed Olga! She was like mother to me. The team reunites with Rodriguez. I only just realized that in the optional third-person mode when holding a sign, the crosshair is placed immediately behind your head. That's, some symbolism.
History fact of the day. Did you know that the Clear used to have flesh
people are always coming up to me and saying, how can I be more like Rodriguez?
There's a lot of irony in finally hearing something interesting from this game, only for this asshole to interrupt it so I can't hear a damn thing. I mean, everything else so far has been basically
hollow words and arbitrary symbols.
So we get another side objective, which is just to restock a time warp gadget if we really want it. I noticed something when walking over here. There's actually a scene in one of the earlier trailers that showed an active battle in this area. Hey, this is one of the first scenes we saw in a trailer right here where they're grenade launching some Gunnars and biomechs. Do they ever show up here? So either that was scrapped or faked for the trailer, I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like the best environment for a fight, although earlier into this chapter we were thrust into a claustrophobic battle with Gunnars, Processed, and a Canoom, so this couldn't have been any weirder than that. What comes immediately after is actually a really good fight. Oh, hey, that's much like their melee from Serious Sam 3. You know, whereas one might consider this lazy, I see it as an improvement over the boring knife stabs. Seeing this whole melee system in these games as superior in their previous 10 years old game, I don't know, it's not the best look. Can't occupy myself with that comment for long because again, this upcoming fight is pretty badass. We've already gone over what makes a long, linear environment with oncoming enemies so refreshing in Serious Sam 4, so I won't waste your time with that argument. Just know that decimating a horde of Gunnar with dual miniguns, it's a lot of fun. Here's where you're supposed to get the cannon, specifically for this fight that involves countless giant monsters. I'd say you almost need the cannon to be able to tolerate the intensity of this fight. But I mean, I'm not the world's greatest gamer, so you be the judge. You do have the assistance of the NPCs here, but I actually just noticed something. They only seem to use assault rifles and shotguns. That didn't matter any time before where that was enough firepower regardless. But here it's like using BB pellets. I mean, you're not going to see a Canoom fall very easily to those. But you know what? This battle does make for a good time to use the enemy riding skill. So let's activate that and hitch a ride on a Canoom. I don't think he's supposed to be moving this slow. Anyways, when you ride a Canoom, and other enemies of this sort, you can use their abilities to your advantage by pressing the fire button. The Canoom can shoot 3 arcing fireballs. The animation doesn't quite work because he's meant to charge the attack first, but the developers instead let you activate the throw immediately. I'm not gonna nitpick that, just pointing it out as something I noticed. There's something else that I noticed, but I mean, it'd be hard not to notice being thrown out of the battle. I talked to someone about this because I was very confused. Apparently this could have to do with me being put in the exact spot where an enemy was spawning at that time, but it's hard to tell for sure. Thankfully, you can just get off, kill the beast, and get back in there. I imagine this kind of thing is exceptionally rare, so don't worry about it. This fight reminds me a lot of Metropolis, or Suburbs from the first encounter. They've thrown a variety of enemies in this one, which requires the player to be far more observant than, I would say, any other point in the game so far. It's good. Go at this one with a clear mind in order to survive. So I threw a black hole and this happened.
Keep it coming, Mental!
Hey, there you are.
Oh hey, we haven't seen Hellfire for a while.
I saw some goodies on my way here. Sam, you wanna go resupply?
So in exchange for your beloved mini nuke, Sam and Hellfire go on a mini date.
Oh man!
Good times.
Kinda romantic, actually.
You think when this war is over, we can ever go on a real date? Like, without killing anyone?
I don't know.
If you jump into this crevice here, you get soft-locked and need to reload a save. So my suggestion is, just don't do that.
You know, this is just like that time in Baden-Baden.
Get ready for Serious Sam 9, the Baden-Baden encounter.
How was your date?
Shut up, Rodriguez.
I have many questions. Most particularly, why was Sam's voice being played with an intercom filter?
Shut up, Rodriguez.
Aw, heck yeah, Ghostbuster time. So this is the Death Ray secondary fire for the laser gun. It creates a beam of energy that is 400% more powerful, but drains ammo like no tomorrow. Extremely useful in an overwhelming situation where there are far more monsters than you know how to deal with. It's a godsend for the final chapter.
You see, he's good.
By this point, the castle environment is starting to get a little old, but at least Serious Sam 4 does provide the wacky gimmicks which you're probably going to want to try experimenting with more since we're getting close to the end of the game. I really wanted to try riding a biomech major, but they kept dying due to NPC fire. I did manage to get it working a couple times, and it's as you would expect. That said, I expected this to be pretty cool, so mission accomplished. After some very long but entertaining fights, Sam and the crew find themselves at the supposed resting spot for the Holy Grail. This should be easy, right?
You taught me something about this planet, Sam. It's a disease.
We're going full Matrix mode now, are we?
Nope, he's a butterfly.
How lovely!
This is undeniably the best boss fight of the game, because you cannot easily exploit it, and the method of taking him down is fairly intuitive. As Akromon tears through the skies and throws things at you, you'll need to distinguish between the many clones he makes of himself. I found the real one has more of a physicality to it, while the rest of them have a slightly holographic look. Not easily noticeable at a distance, but with a scoped weapon like the Devastator, you can manage. After he takes a predetermined amount of damage, his egg sac, or whatever the heck that thing is, can be targeted by planting C4 and then detonating. The reason you're going to need to take this out is because it helps Akromon to regenerate his health. Without it though, it's a matter of shooting him until he's dead.
Oh, the hero.
Deconstruct that.
Samuel, I am certain now it is not Grail. Grail was intended to heal wounds of the world. This is something else.
We came all this way. Let's at least have a look.
I'm not sure how the father came up with that hypothesis, but as it turns out, he's correct.
It's a dick.
Do touch it.
He's right. Touch it. Oh, you people. You were so dumb. This whole fucking planet. All sheep. No wonder Mental is winning. You believe anything you're told. I didn't even need to invent General Brand. You already believed in him. He's that tough old bastard who doesn't play by the rules. But if we trust him, he'll do what needs to be done. I recognize the true order of things. It's time for me to be on the winning side. Humanity had its chance.
Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest plot twist of Serious Sam 4. I think there's something to be said when a story actually subverts my expectations. We didn't really like Brand from his reckless behavior throughout the game, but we're meant to believe he's just a valiant fighter. Nope, turns out he was always on the wrong side. And you know what makes this twist so much better? The fact that throughout the game we're being fed constant propaganda about how heroes are worthless, a product of their time. Mental's retribution has eliminated the value of these icons, or so the propaganda is trying to persuade you into believing. Then, after all this fighting, all the victories and the hardships, the very idea humanity was clinging to, focused on a character who used this to humanity's own disadvantage. It proves how, honestly, Akromon wasn't just bluffing to demotivate us. He was the bad guy of this story, but he still had a point. We built our motivation on an idea, a dream that would be exploited to destroy our foundation. While the idea of heroes isn't inherently flawed, General Brand proves this has the ability to get to that point. Be exactly what the villain is against to appeal to the masses. Do it all in disguise and you've made for a great decoy. But if you think this is the beginning of its greatness, unfortunately I can't say Serious Sam 4's story does anything else to impress beyond this one, which I actually thought was quite well done. You know, up to this point I thought Lord Akromon was going to end up being the final boss, but now it seems like General Brand is our final destination. After all, we were given that flashback during the introductory chapter, so I can't wait to fight General Brand in Chapter 15. Oh, yeah, so in case you're unaware of the motive behind the Grail, Brand wanted it to become, as he puts it,
the Beast of the Apocalypse, the Lord of Despair. I am the last human.
Grant us strength, O Lord, before these the soldiers of darkness, against powers and principalities.
Silence!
Brand.
Do you fear the word of God?
What does your God say now, Father?
He says...
Gangnam Style.
Asshole!
So, Brand manages to knock out the crew.
I want this one gift-wrapped.
And the others?
Feed them to the drones.
Chapter 14. The Package. Oh boy, it has taken me a while to get to this one. And I mean regarding the script writing. This chapter blows my mind for a couple of reasons. First being that it's terrible. Second being that it was discovered to be an asset swap, using 2013 assets to be precise. Not only was it an asset swap, but it's actually been used in another Serious Sam game before, VR The Last Hope. There are a couple of stages that got scrapped before Serious Sam 4 released. notably the refinery and zoo. The zoo was probably scrapped because they never finished the animal NPCs. The refinery was probably scrapped because it was basically the package 2.0. Nobody wants any more of this. Even that one was proven to be an asset flip. This has yet to be definitively confirmed, but it's quite likely that the assault rifle and optional Tommy gun skin were also purchased assets. If there's one thing I can give the package, it's that the soundtrack is quite stellar. It almost parodies the the Tetris theme. So it starts with Sam having this janky flashback in his old spaceship, only to be awoken in some train under Brand's command. He gets injected at the very bottom of his arm for some reason. He wakes up yet again and somehow stabs the guy with the syringe into his eye. Except if you take a closer look, it appears more as if he did that to himself. What follows is some of the most unenthusiastic screaming I've ever heard. Sam breaks himself free and... Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Stop shooting! I want him alive.
Sam takes a parachute and there's a short dialogue exchange between the two of them.
He'll have a much better life as Mental's pet.
Brand's new eyes are the special kind that never move. Sam lands and there's a boat.
A boat!
He talks to the boat.
Listen, you just stay up there until I come get you.
Having just landed, Sam is once again limited to his starting weapons. You quickly pick up the single shotgun and... Wait, don't go into the water, it's freezing. Now you're fighting an arachnoid major with single shotguns. Good idea? Charlie, is that you? Next you get the rocket launcher. A few meters away is that multi-rocket mod in case you didn't complete the side objective in Chapter 4. Yeah, this is Chapter 14. It takes 10 stages to get this thing otherwise, but hey, at least you can. What comes next are some fights in this open snowy area. This goes as well as you'd expect, and by that I mean there was the potential for some good fights, but they just kind of ignored that. Instead, you'll be making your way to this oil rig in what is potentially the most not serious Sam gameplay in the franchise. You'll be walking through extremely tight spaces with very few enemies and a decreased walking speed. What were they thinking with this one? There's some bizarre moaning going on down below, and I couldn't find any lore to explain why that is, so just ignore it. You could also ignore these little radios, but you shouldn't because it's unusually entertaining.
I would like to register test complaint to test system to register complaint. This is test.
What?
Some Russian dude left recordings complaining about pretty much everything he possibly could. It's a bit like my analysis for this chapter of the game. That doesn't look quite right.
Oh! God damn it!
This is kinda neat. They made a whole text adventure game that you can actually play. It doesn't interest me personally, but I admire the sentiment. Completing it unlocks a storage locker that contains some goodies. This takes a couple minutes to get through if you play it seriously. It's worth it for the heart gadget, should you be a fan of that revival mechanic.
This is Bill Corwin at Radio Free Earth, and boy, have I got news for you. Lord Ackerman is dead. The commander of the European campaign and noted asshat has been killed in Carcassonne, France, by none other than our very own Sam Stone, a.k.a. Serious Sam, and his team of badasses. Everyone here at the station is still reeling from the news, but in a good way. Wow. Just wow.
This is one of the shorter Radio Free Earth broadcasts in the game. It's a bit confusing considering how Ackerman was the focus of pretty much every broadcast Bill Corwin did, so you'd just expect, I don't know, maybe a little bit more than this.
Hey folks, Valentin the Mad here, and today...
Walk up here and get the auto shotgun. Just after, step outside and encounter what is the best part of this level. The fight in this area actually feels like Serious Sam. Granted, I don't think this is a great environment for the game, and it's not much more than what is at this point familiar gameplay. The spawns are somewhat unique. They did bring some verticality to the level. Has a focus on this spacious environment, and I could appreciate the intention there. Honestly though, I could mistake this section for a survival map. I mean, it's not a bad fight, but the only reason it stands out to me is because otherwise, it's just very underwhelming and slow. I guess that's how they wanted to transition into the final chapter, which is the change of pace that we need. Sam collects the boat, and now we're off to the final 15th chapter. Chapter 15, From Earth with Love. Well, it all comes down to this. Sam departs from his boat to a partially snowy mountainscape.
Now what?
I don't know. Do what we normally do and kill some monsters, maybe.
Huh? Strange things are afoot in the Arctic Circle. Hey, Sam! I'm you, from the future. It's complicated, just roll with it.
Which is exactly what I assume we are meant to do because this reflects a part of the timeline we haven't experienced yet. This is going forwards in time, so whatever happened here is assumedly post-second encounter. With all the inevitable prequels we have in store, frankly I don't think we'll ever learn about this occurrence. The scene also suggests different timelines in the Serious Sam universe, so maybe Croteam isn't actually planning to expand on this? Does anything matter in this series anymore? It's still a first-person shooter, but, a lot of the time it isn't. Nonetheless, future Sam gives past Sam a snowmobile.
Good to know I have my back.
Sam communicates with Quinn, who thought he and his crew were dead, understandably. She'll then assist him in locating the Tunguska front.
Thanks, Quinn. Always a pleasure.
Sam takes off and decapitates a Knoom with his snowmobile on the way. We run into that guy who was complaining in those oil rig chapter recordings. Not for any particular reason, he's just there. I think that's him anyways. Same voice, same attitude.
Is this joke?
Just another we did it because we could moment, which is fine. Speaking of which, start the level and you'll find the last broadcast and recording in the game by Bill Corwin, each within a couple yards of each other. Even into the final chapter, these are hardly more than a ramble. I'd like the game to stop wasting my time, so I then collected the ammunition I needed, of which there was plenty, and headed straight for the Tunguska front. Wait, no, there's a side objective for Rage Serum. I don't need this, I'm not gonna use it, but I still gotta get it since this is the ultimate FrameRater Serious Sam 4 video after all. This level looked a lot brighter in the pre-release footage, which I honestly thought kinda looked better, but I suppose this lighting choice is more dramatic for a final chapter. Also dramatic is Damien's remake of the Grand Cathedral OST from Serious Sam the Second Encounter. Good stuff, if a bit nostalgia pandering, but what can I say? It's a good track. And the side objective? It's fine, not much to say about it. Fairly predictable fight with some Octanians, biomechs, and processed. Afterwards, you're hoarded by kamikaze, and some biomechs fire rockets at you from a distance.
The base is secure, but I don't see any survivors. Sorry, Quinn.
You know, I told General Brand this would happen, but did he listen to me? No!
Anyone gonna fill her in on the whole General Brand is evil thing?
Hurry up or you'll miss all the fun!
Oh hey, I guess the crew wasn't processed after all. So that's some good news. I guess that's them there. Alright, so how should I summarize this chapter? Well, at first you fight some Gnar, Clear, and Biomech miners. It picks up progressively by introducing werebills, reptiloids, and Biomech majors. You know, I said I wasn't gonna use this, but fuck it.
This can't be good for me, but I feel great.
There's a part where you take on some Gnar, Clear, and Brute Zealots. Yeah, remember these guys? Really underused enemy, but I can't say I'm complaining since the back shooting mechanic is a bit frustrating. I understand it's a replica of modern Doom's Pinky mechanic, though those things are quick, loud, and often spawn close enough that you aren't having to wait for them for too long. Well, once you have explosive weaponry, you can take down Zealots easily with a blow from the front. So with the Devastator in hand, this isn't a problem. Maybe one thing to mention with this is perhaps if more weaponry was given to the player earlier into the game, the Zealots could have been used more frequently without being a nuisance to the player. Hello. There's this one battle surrounded by trees, which I remember on the first playthrough being a bit confusing. You see, several enemy attacks resemble bright lights. In between tree leaves, you're going to see the light behind it. That source of light will often be the snow or distant skybox, which are both rather bright. Admittedly, this might be more of a me problem, but it became a lot harder to pinpoint where the active threats were. I often tried to leave these areas as quickly as I could, but I don't think that was intended by design since the spawns surround that exact space. This is a problem I've encountered in a few of Serious Sam 4's environments. It might be the worst here, however, because you're fighting against space mummies, who throw the exact shade of lights that you're going to be seeing surrounding the trees, and it all just gets a little confusing.
Contains a powerful neutrino generator.
So you pick up the laser gun again, with death ray attachment. There's tons of clear, so you're going to want to be using that. There's also a massive supply of ammunition, so this was by all means intentional. Using this death ray is immensely satisfying. I do find it a bit strange how they advertise the laser gun a fair bit in pre-release, but the amount of chapters it's available for are, let's see, chapters 12, 13, and 15, so this thing is only in 3 levels. Well anyways, there's a pretty good fight here with all sorts of biomech, and I always love blasting holes into these guys. Then there's the wearable encounter. This is chaotic, and I love it. Hey, wouldn't it be like, you know, pretty cool if more of the game was like this? It's weird that we've come to expect this kind of combat in a Serious Sam game, yet at this point it's something the series doesn't really do a whole lot of, at least not anymore. This does prove the game is at least capable of it, and well, speaking of capability...
Hey! Who started the party without me?
You're late! Good to have you back, boss.
So, this is the Legion system, once more. Same spot as the prologue chapter. Yeah, it looks impressive, but we've already come to understand how it actually works. It's not that crazy, especially considering how the grand majority of what you see here are just sprites made to resemble 3D models at a distance. The actual model count here isn't much unlike what you've already seen thus far. It's neat, but I do know there's a game coming out called Ultimate Epic Battle Simulator 2 that features millions of actual models on screen at once, which makes Serious Sam 4's Legion system look like a joke, honestly. To boot, it's mostly composed of simple AI running forwards. Well, for the friendlies anyways, but what about those enemies? Yeah, it's basically the same, although they can hurt you. The amount of active threats isn't going to be 100,000 as was suggested in marketing. It's probably more like 100, maybe, and most of those are going to be Octanians. There are a couple biomechs in Knoom, but that's it. Kind of amazing just how lame this turned out to be. I can't think of a reason why they held back, maybe for optimization purposes? But as we discussed prior, optimization never seemed to be a priority in Serious Sam 4's development. There's a decent roster of enemies in this game, so why stick to such basic spawns here? Well, anyways, what you're supposed to do is a bit tricky. The first couple times I played through the game, I was genuinely unsure how the player was meant to progress. Even to this day, my reliability in doing so is not great. Running forward results in death. You have to lead the attack, so it says. Not very descriptive. What you're meant to do is walk forward cautiously, while shooting forwards at the oncoming horde. Doing so will slowly but surely back them up so that the friendlies can lead on. There's a crate of ammo a ways back that replenishes everything, including your health, so you don't really have to worry about much. It's a ways back though, so you might feel like you're losing progress when you have to keep running back there, just for the enemies to storm back up again. With a little patience, you will get far enough to have General Brand do his thing, as was demonstrated in the prologue.
Damn it! You keep getting uglier.
I, Howard Brand,
Howard?
have summoned thee, Oog-san.
So, I had a copy of Serious Sam 4 maybe a week or two before it launched. I wasn't spoiling my friend, but he knew I had the game. He said to me at one point, "Just please, Frame, tell me the final boss isn't another Oog-san." And so this is Oog-san the 6th.
Yep.
The last human, the beast of the apocalypse.
You know, Brand's pants actually grew with him when he took the Holy Grail. That's just something to think about. Now Sam is back on foot and we hear Undercode's Dominate the Battlefield instrumental, which was a theme created for this game. It has a music video, which is very strange and features clowns. Oog-san will shoot lasers from his eyes, and avoiding those is a good idea. A parachute and grappling hook are dropped off, which will be used to climb up onto Oog-san. Plant C4 at multiple impact points, then blow them up. This is the first of 2 phases.
I didn't need to see that.
Alright.
It ain't about size, it's about technique.
After this, you're dropped a freaking mech once more. Shoot Nukem for a little while, then the boss is defeated.
Oh no, you don't. Take that, snake stick.
That thing's gonna blow!
Yep. Open wide.
Oog-san follows this order for some reason, and then his head blows up in a rather similar fashion to Prince Chan from Serious Sam 2. Sam disregards his fellow comrades below as Ugzon kills thousands upon falling over. Then they make puns about his head having blown up.
I got it! We blew his mind!
The team duct tapes General Brand to a giant freaking missile and they shoot it off into the nearby portal, which one would assume is a major breakthrough in the war. Brand doesn't seem all too bothered by it with his freely movable yet completely still feet. Roll credits.
So, how did you guys escape from the Harvester?
Oh, it was so badass.
The gang sits around a fire and reminisces about the adventure, which is a nice send-off. Well, other than revealing the potential for several more prequel stories that nobody's really asking for.
How many times have we saved the Earth now?
I don't know, like 7, 8?
Are we counting Beijing?
Definitely.
What about Oslo? How many more times do you think we can pull this off, saving the planet?
As many as we have to.
So, where do you think they'll send us next?
Someplace warm would be nice.
But not too human.
How about Egypt? Yep.
Then we get this weird post-credits scene with Nana wholesomely dancing to herself. Future Sam teleports back in.
Americano.
Nana, I have a mission for you.
Silly boy.
This scene only uses existing lines from her dialogue, which persuades me into thinking this scene was a last-minute decision. Guess they came up with an idea for some other future Serious Sam game. As is typical for post-credit scenes, we're not supposed to understand the full context until whatever that is comes around. If it ever does, I don't know. This is Croteam, not Marvel. Ladies and gentlemen, it's finally time for our wrap-up. With how long we waited for the next Serious Sam game, it's hard not to feel disappointed with the end result. Ironically, this is a rather ambitious game, just without many necessary directions for the franchise. You could even say the ambitious things it tried to pull off feel half-baked. The ideas and possibilities in a lot of Serious Sam 4's design shows off potential, but it usually ends there. A lot of the usual complaints with the game I feel could have been avoided had it been marketed properly. This has been a huge topic of debate even prior to the release. Once we got the finished product, it became clear how bad of an interpretation Croteam made of their game. When you go back to watch the various interview clips, there's a bizarre sense of skepticism in their commentary. Refer back to the Making of Serious Sam 3 video where these same people seemed confident and proud of their latest achievement. With Serious Sam 4 it was more, new chess pieces, there's an arsenal, big hordes of monsters, you betcha.
I think this game is the game
to which the audience would inevitably say, yeah, obviously, but what else? And Croteam would reply with the Legion system, which they would continue to bring up despite being no more than a visual element, only used once in the roughly 9-hour campaign. Showing short gameplay clips remixed together for trailers is the least that you could do when trying to give the audience an expectation. Doesn't help that a majority of this footage was faked in the editor with temporary spawns and later weapons being cheated in. A big complaint I've seen is how Croteam did not release even a minute of raw gameplay. The closest we got were some low-resolution Twitter GIFs of someone playing it in their office. This is a valid complaint to be made, especially since this is the first game in the series so far to be kept under such restricted supervision. It consistently felt as if something was going terribly wrong and we weren't being given the bigger picture. Serious Sam 4 did in fact have a troubled development cycle. It was long ago when we first heard about the game, only for it to be retconned into the Talus principle. Then Croteam had their multitude of side projects like the Serious Sam VR games, which I assume a majority of the fanbase still haven't tried out. For context, there was one dedicated Serious Sam experience in virtual reality, followed by porting their older games into the new Serious engine, in order to be resold as virtual reality ports. Additionally, there came Fusion from this endeavor, a hub for the games using said engine, which is now the most active place for Serious Sam players. How unfortunate that Croteam doesn't see it like that and prefers to leave it as an abandoned project, which could easily be finished with a couple of bug fixes, but that's a different story. So what did Serious Sam 4 do wrong beyond its marketing, really? Because after all, if a great game was terribly marketed, it'd still be a great game and people likely wouldn't complain. Alas, Serious Sam 4 was terribly marketed and the experience of the released product was mediocre. I'll elaborate. Over the years, Serious Sam carried with it a reputation for being a mascot of old-school shooters, or at the least you could say it was one of the last few games of the early 2000s that felt true to the genre's roots. As time came to pass, shooters were evolving and Croteam felt they needed to keep up with that, as evident by many other games fitting into whatever subgenre was popular during the given time. So instead of being unique to itself, Serious Sam has over the years developed a very noticeable identity crisis. From the subtle humor of the classics to Serious Sam 2's Saturday morning cartoon vibes. From the dark and gritty Serious Sam 3 to the seemingly American-inspired slapstick of Serious Sam 4. When these tonal differences were implemented, the core gameplay changed with it. The era of the classics had only small limitations in what mechanics were appropriate for the series, an example being how the only weapon which required reloading were the Colts. A lot of these classic fundamentals remained true for Serious Sam 2, which was a game that came out when Croteam still had a reason to be totally confident in themselves. By the point of Serious Sam 3, however, they felt the need to follow the trend of making games more realistic, which is an absurdist point of view for a series with such ridiculous concepts like a sprinting, screaming headless man holding 2 active bombs. The results of this realism angle would be having the game taking place in more familiar Earth locations, providing elaborate explanations for each ridiculous enemy design, and making the weapons handle more similarly to their real-world counterparts. I still enjoy the idea of reloading, and even sprinting to a degree, but sometimes I wonder if maybe I just want Sam to move faster at his default pace. Then there's the vehicles, which I'm only going to mention because they're hardly used, and once they are introduced, the player won't be doing much other than using them for faster travel off to the next far-off waypoint. And why is the next waypoint so far away? It's like these large maps only exist for the vehicles, which only exist for the large maps, which only exist for the vehicles, which only exist for the large maps, which... What it comes down to is, we didn't do this because it was good for the game, we did it because our new engine is capable of it. That kind of design philosophy isn't exactly new for Croteam, but perhaps made most obvious in Serious Sam 4. It's not that fun to travel in this game, and the endeavor makes collecting supplies a trial of monotony, especially once you've unlocked the enemy loot dropping skill. There's no way to pick up this stuff at a distance, you need to be pretty much standing on anything to collect it. A huge nuisance in the final chapter. Having massive environments is something Serious Sam has been known for, though I can't imagine this making up much of its appeal, really. The technology is neat, but does it contribute much to the gameplay? I would argue not. As discussed, it usually contributes more in a negative way than a positive one. I also must ask what the initiative is for developing their ambitious engine, when even they fail to utilize it properly. Their flagship entry is unoptimized. I mean, just take one look at the game and you'll probably see a texture pop in somewhere. In Croteam's history, not many have even shown interest in licensing the Serious engine. With the large variety of accessible and cheap game engines that exist today, is there any purpose, outside of pride, to keep pushing this engine? Now, how about a little positivity? One thing I often hear discussed is how this game uses a multitude of assets from the Talos principle. And while in a typical scenario I would agree that that's lazy, considering these assets were originally produced for Serious Sam 4, I give it an exception. I'd more easily admit to the Talos principle being the lazy game for not having its own assets produced after the decision was made to flip it. All I'm getting at is, I don't really think the blame should be pointed at Sam 4 for this. Now, there are objective flaws in Serious Sam 4's design, but I've come to notice over the years that the reasons why I love this series do not reflect everyone's taste. Some fans really liked Serious Sam 4, so while this recap has so far been mostly objective, the following comments are probably more subjective and may only fit to this FrameRater analysis video. Maybe you'll agree with me, and maybe you won't. Let's start off with an easy one. The knife? Nah. I think this is one most people will agree with, but it is still subjective. To me, the knife is an excuse to have many easily animated kills, and not have to create an individual jibbing mechanic for all smaller enemies, as was the case in Serious Sam 3 with the sledgehammer. I would take that thing over the knife any day of the week. And about that tone. I've heard more people say they dislike the tone of this game than people who do like it. However, there is still a sizable part of the community that enjoys it, so what side do I fall into? I don't like it. Serious Sam once had this really great niche interest in being this subtly humorous and cartoony shooter. While it does retain bits and pieces of those roots, it feels largely absent compared to the tone of games like the Second Encounter, for instance. Now, I feel the best tone for a Serious Sam game is reflected in what Climax did for the Next Encounter. However, since Croteam didn't make that one, or at least how much of it they did is a mystery, I think it's better to be compared with Second Encounter. The remarks Sam made in that game were playful.
The doorman should wear a suit.
He was never edgy, and would make occasional dumb jokes to give himself character and make the player laugh.
Man, it's cold. My nipples are like pencil erasers.
He would even break the fourth wall on occasion, so you felt a more personal connection with Sam while you played the game. Give Sam a bunch of companions, a big epic story, and actual narrative purpose to his one-liners, then you effectively ruin that dynamic. It's especially hard for me to relate to this cast knowing most of them have the potential to serve as comic relief characters. What do you know? It gets old. It's been said by internal members of Croteam that the cast of characters is important for the series going forward. This isn't something I vibe with, so here's to my hoping that they go back on it because I fail to see the potential there. Serious Sam was able to do something unique at one point, which was having countless monsters teaming up against one solo protagonist. In today's gaming industry, there is countless competition for this subgenre. I understand the desire to make the series more unique, but nothing about Serious Sam would ever demand this new direction. I think in many ways, it distracts from what the focus should be. That being said, I'm not sure Croteam cares too much about what their fanbase wants anymore. It feels like Serious Sam has become their outlet of making whatever the heck kind of game they want at the time of creating it. These games will all share things in common, sure, but beyond a few of its glimmering roots, Serious Sam's identity is terribly inconsistent. Could that have improved with this game if more time was put into its development? I would say probably not. It seems like regarding the tone, they knew what they were going for this time around, and I can loosely understand why they thought this was a good idea, but in execution I don't feel it worked out as they probably wanted it to.
Serious Sam 3 je zapravo jedan mali isičak iz cijele sage. To je jedan bogat univerz sa jednom zanimljivom pričom i pozadinom tom karakteru i događajima. I da ne otkrivam previše, mogu samo reći da će biti fenomenalne stvari, tako da.
And with that comes my speculation that Croteam was getting a bit sick of this project. Being stuck in development hell, having so many side projects and distractions along the way, and a load of random ideas that needed more time in the oven to be fully realized, they couldn't just can the hard work they put into the game thus far, especially considering the limited budget of the studio. So, Serious Sam 4 may have been finished up rather hastily in order to get it out of the way, and proceed with working on the Talos Principle too. I might not have mentioned it yet, but Alan Ladovac, one of Croteam's founding fathers, actually left the team years ago to work at Google Stadia, of all things. If you check his Twitter page now, it says he's moved on from that, so who knows if this was actually worth leaving Croteam for. Maybe he had other reasons too, but who knows. I can only imagine him leaving the team would have had a big effect on the game's development. But as far as those things go, we can only speculate. Let's take a moment to reflect on those gadgets. I admire the idea to expand the game's combat, and I will say that these don't hurt the game. They're fun to toy around with, but usually unnecessary, especially for a seasoned player. Something kind of odd to think about is how these gadgets actually kind of existed even in the classic games, but they were in the form of power-ups. You remember Invulnerability, Serious Speed, and Serious Damage? Biggest difference was how you could only use them as they've been picked up in predetermined areas. I think implementing these powers as gadgets in Serious Sam 4 would have been practical, as they're more useful for new and existing players. While you're at it, why not add one that initiates unlimited ammo? I think it'd be a great choice for this game's arsenal, although I'll admit the combat isn't often hectic enough to warrant using that full supply of weapons. And I think that's where Serious Sam 4's biggest disappointment lies. It was said prior to release that Serious Sam 4 would be an intense shooter from the moment you start up until the end. I find that the game does have a challenge in its earliest moments, but it never pushes far past that. The first real chapter of the game doesn't feel to be any easier or harder than levels much further on into the campaign. The important difference to me is that your arsenal is significantly smaller at that point. While we're reflecting on this chapter, it happens to be one of a small selection of levels where you actually feel there's a sense of corridor shooting. The majority of this game is outdoors, which is fine, it just gives less possibilities for the corridor shooting you expect to see between the larger battles that we know of. For the most part, future corridors in the game are just urban city streets. There's not too much you can do with these environments, and the gameplay reflects that pretty well. I guess there's also the castle chapter, and while the exterior looks okay, the interior is awful. It's also pretty awful how there's still just one crosshair in the game. Yeah, how's that for a segue? In lots of modern shooters, there's no option to change the crosshair, but it's been somewhat of a series staple since the beginning. There have since been mods that you can download from the Steam Workshop to add more crosshairs into the game, which I've heard were actually included in the game's files but disabled in the menus. My theory is they excluded them because the final game's crosshair is probably the best one to use in order to get successful headshots. Having tried the other ones now, I see this one as more distinctive. When I first started playing Serious Sam 4 a year ago, I felt inclined to leave the series behind because of how separated it felt from everything else. I have no expectations for the direction of this series going forward anymore. At some point I figured that, if the series has no guarantee to continue entertaining my personal ideals, then why am I still here? Over time I have grown a bit more of a fondness towards it, but there are things I will never care for, such as its level design, story, characters, and its new narrative.
Science fact of the day!
Good news, everyone!
However, the gunplay is quite good, some of the enemies look fantastic, and the soundtrack is great. There's a lot to love about Serious Sam 4, but there is perhaps equally as much to consider as the result of questionable development choices.
Oh boy, we're gonna need a bigger lawnmower.
and I was just starting to relax.
Well, you might be wondering where we go from here. We've taken our extensive look at Serious Sam 4, so what now? And is FrameRater finally over Serious Sam?
Over? Oh, it's not over until I teabag every last one of you alien motherfuckers.